I'll call the meeting to order.
Sure. Let's see here. Mr. Williams,
Present.
Ms. Tabashnik,
Here.
Miss Jordan Byron,
Present.
Miss Wells,
Here.
Miss Langalis,
Here.
Mr. Bryce,
Here.
Mr. Rowena,
Here.
Mr. Cantor,
Here.
and Mr. Schulman.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Okay. I'm going to seat Ms. Tabachnik for the entirety of the meeting. That means everyone that's here should be fully engaged. We have a number of public hearings. I guess I'll go over how the public hearings are run for each one individually. The first project is 2024-04 R/SPR Building and Land Technology 77, 87, 111, 117, 129, 135, 155, 156, and 201 Glover Avenue, District 5, Blocks 38A, Lots 40, 51, 5A, 22, 29, 19, 36, 35, and 50. The project known as North 7. Zoning regulations, it says here text amendment. I don't believe a text amendment is required. To revise article, I'm going to skip that. This is in the executive office zone, and we're undertaking a site plan review and other associated site improvements at 77 Glover Avenue in accordance with the approved North 7 master plan. Now, that's not strictly correct. In order to undertake action on the site plan review, we need to alter the master plan itself because the master plan called for 2 buildings where now we're placing only 1. So we'll take at the end of the hearing 2 actions. One will be action on the master plan, the other being on the site plan review. With that, I guess we'll start off with Mr. Waters, Attorney Waters, for North 7.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. For the record, David Waters, General Counsel to Building and Land Technology and its affiliated entities, representing the applicant here this evening. Also here with me are Andrew White from Tighe & Bond, our civil engineers, and Victor Moranchuk of EDI International, the architects.
David, I'm
Yes.
sorry to interrupt. I said I was going to explain how we run public hearings, and I
Yes.
forgot to do it.
Okay.
I apologize for interrupting.
No worries.
The way our public hearings are run is the applicant will have an opportunity to explain the development, during which members of the commission are welcome to ask any questions they have. We may also call on staff or in this case, our architectural reviewer for comments. When that part of the hearing is completed, we will open the hearing up to the public. We ask that you give us your name and your address before speaking. Probably Mr. Baker will explain at the appropriate time how to raise your hand so that you can speak. We do not limit the amount of time you can speak. We ask that you be as brief as possible while making all the points that are important to you, because you do have only one opportunity to speak. And we ask that you simply keep your comments civil, P rating, if you will. When everyone who wishes to speak has had an opportunity, we will then turn it back to Attorney Waters for further and closing comments, after which we'll close the hearing and proceed to action by the commission members. And with that, I'll turn it back to Attorney Waters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, David Waters representing the applicant here. I note for the record that we opened the public hearing on this matter on February 21st. It was then continued to March 6th and then to tonight. And so some testimony has already been given, as well as some public testimony. The reason that it was continued until tonight was to review your third-party consultant's peer review and whatever comments we as the applicant would make to those, and to then move on to hopefully a resolution of approval based on the analysis that has been done. There are a few things that we specifically wanted to discuss. Your staff has been kind enough to provide us with a copy of their memorandum and the draft resolution. And there are certain items that are within it that we specifically wanted to address. And so if you don't mind, I will share my screen and we can move on from there. Can everybody see that?
Yeah, we can see that.
Great, thank you. So the first topic to discuss actually deals with the master plan itself and the revisions that Mr. Chairman you were referred to, and it is further addressed in your staff memorandum and in the master plan resolution condition number 2. To remind you where we started from, on the top here, you'll see the approved master plan, which was building 1.1, 11 stories in height, dropping to a 1.1A at 5 stories in height with retail beneath it, and town square, and then a building 1.2, also 5 stories in height with retail beneath it. And as we explained, actually going back almost a year on an informal basis and then formally last fall, we recognized that the original design was not workable. It not having any parking whatsoever in building 1.2, having very limited loading possibilities and what have you, it just was not a workable building in and of itself. And so therefore, we proposed to take the density of residential from building 1.2, bring it over to building 1.1. As part of the design, we increased the height from 11 stories to 12 stories in the middle area, but we dropped it to 5 stories at both ends with green roofs and an 11-story component to the rear. And that then incorporated basically all of the retail or the residential density. We incorporated more of the retail than what was shown in 1.1A, but not the total retail that was included between 1.1A and 1.2. And our original proposal had shown just that building plus town square and a dog park. in discussions with your staff and with your peer review consultant, there was a desire to increase the presence of activities on the street. And as a result, we agreed to include a pavilion building, which you can see I'm showing on the cursor with the cursor right here, between the town square and the dog park. That pavilion building is kind of a great location because what it does is it provides for a small retail area that is suited to commuters that are going from the parking lot to the train station, people that are at the dog park, people that are at town square, people that are walking on the street, people that are coming across from Merit 7 over across the pedestrian bridge at the train station that can come over to town square. So it's a great location for a coffee shop, basically. You grab a coffee or a soda or a candy bar or things like that, and probably some smaller foodstuffs, not a full restaurant, obviously, but again, things that are servicing to the community that are there. And we also went through and have explained with some detail why we believe that a dog park is actually an activating force of the neighborhood. Dog parks are very active 3 times a day, 365 days a year, rain or shine, because that's what the dogs need. And they're a great area for socialization, not only of the dogs, but also of the people that are with the dogs. And in our experience, there are more and more residential tenants that have dogs, and it's really getting to the point where the population is almost the same. So we feel that this is really truly an activation of the site as well, and that's why we proposed it, and we proposed it in the area that we did. I think it's generally based upon the report that we've received from your peer consultant and your staff report. It's really just a difference of opinion. Your consultant seems to feel that the dog park is not really an activation of the street, that instead there should be a building there. I would argue that the dog park is more active and creates a better sense of community than any building in that location would, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But I would note that your other peer consultant, AKRF, concurred with us that a dog park is a socializing and community building component, and that the location of it where it is an appropriate location. So if we didn't do what we are proposing to do here, and if instead we did what is being proposed by your staff and consultant, where in addition to expanding the pavilion space, that we would put another building on the street side of the property, what would that be used for? Well, it wouldn't be used for retail, because we've already explained why the retail doesn't work when you don't have parking and you don't have loading and you don't have refuse removal. And frankly, it's not in a location that's conducive to people being able to go in and use it and leave. So retail's really not a viable alternative, and 2 coffee shops are certainly not a viable alternative. It was suggested in the memo that perhaps this could be event or gallery space. And I would suggest that event or gallery space is, again, a very limited use, and otherwise it's closed. There's nothing in the building. There's no activity going on whatsoever. It was suggested, and in fact, there's a picture below of on Day Street where apparently there's a standalone building that is used for bike storage. In our case, we have ample, and in fact, more than ample bike storage that is proposed within our residential building. And that's where the tenants are going to want to have their bicycles, not at an outbuilding. And so it really doesn't help, and it doesn't serve any purpose for that as well. But again, as I said, the dogs are there three times a day. and there's a lot of them. So I would suggest that if we were to follow the recommendation of your consultant and to add a building in that location, it would in fact be a zombie building. And frankly, that would be worse than if there was nothing there, because there is nothing worse than having a vacant storefront that is just there all the time. Frankly, what it also would do is it would hide the dog park. What's being suggested is that you put this building in the front and then you put the dog park in the back. Well, first of all, it would hide the dog park. So you've now lost the activation component of the street. The thing that people are gathering for is the dog park itself. The dog park would also, based upon adding another building, be undersized for what we expect is going to be the demand, not only from this building, but also as we move north up the street. And it sandwiches the dog park between the back of this building and what you don't see because you're looking straight down. There's a rather significant retaining wall at the back of the property. So you're really kind of in a canyon for the dog park. So again, it is counterintuitive to what is really intended for this area. And we suggest that the better alternative is what we have proposed.
David, excuse me, this is off the topic, relates really to the pavilion.
Sure.
Excuse me, if I'm a commuter parking in the garage, it seems to me I want to get my coffee and newspaper when as I move from the garage out onto the street, not have to walk over to the pavilion for that.
Right.
I'm wondering. I mean, I have no problem with the pavilion building being there and being available to support the dog park or to support the town square. But I'm not sure that it's really going to serve the commuters.
So, Mr. Chairman, a couple of things. I would agree with you to some extent, and that is to the extent that people are parking on the east side, which is at the bottom of this picture, of in the parking lots that are at either end of the platform. I completely agree with you that they're not going to walk down and then cross over and then walk back across.
Right.
But remember that just to the north of this, just off of this picture, is going to be, currently there is an 83 space on-grade parking lot, and that will be incorporated into a parking garage that will be part of our next phase of development. And so I think that it is highly likely that people that are parked here that then get out of the garage at about this location can walk down the sidewalk, grab their paper or their coffee or whatever it is, and then cross right over to the platform at that point. But I agree with you that it's, you know, you're not going to find people that are at the far end of the platform that are going to walk all the way over here unless it's really good coffee. The next thing that I'd like to talk about is this was generated by a request from TMP, and it's now reflected as condition number 3 in your resolution with respect to the master plan, and condition number 10 with respect to your resolution with respect to the site plan. And that is a requirement that all utilities be placed underground. To be clear, all of our service lines are underground. They are proposed to be underground. So what we're talking about is an obligation to place all of the main lines that are on Glover Avenue underground, where currently they are above ground. This is a bit of a sore point for us because we've been arguing about this and arguing for this for over 5 years. We completely agree that they should have been placed underground. They should have been placed underground years ago. When we first were in discussions about this, which began more like about 7 years ago, we suggested as part of the train station improvements that DOT and Eversource should have done it. And they should have been required to do it. The city actually pledged funds about 7 years ago for infrastructure improvements. Those funds were not forthcoming. And everybody sat on their hands except for us screaming that these utilities should be placed underground. To add insult to injury, when DOT and Eversource did the station improvements, they moved the overhead lines from the east side, from the train station side of the street over to our side of the street. So now they've impacted us even more so. So we completely agree that the utilities should be placed underground. In the meantime, while they were doing that, we have been at our expense putting millions of dollars literally into upgrading the other utilities that are in Glover Avenue and that are underground. And that's all been, again, at our expense. But at this point, to underground the overhead utilities that currently exist would literally cost several $million. And by our consulting engineer's estimate, it would take about a year to do it. And part of the reason for that is because of all of those existing utilities that are in the street already, and the fact that the improvements have already been made as part of the train station improvements to the street that now all have to be dug up. So just to be clear, and this is not to be melodramatic, if this were a condition of approval, it would make the project economically not viable. Pure statement of fact. However, what we are willing to do in recognition and certainly to encourage the undergrounding of utilities is we're willing to accept a condition that we would grant whatever easements are required in order to underground the facilities, and we would grant those at no cost to the city. But we're just not able or willing to undertake that ourselves. The third thing that I want to raise as a discussion point was again an item that was raised by TMP, and it's now reflected in condition number 12 of the site plan resolution. And that is to realign the intersection of Oakwood Avenue and Glover Avenue. And you can just see it here on the very far left of the picture. It's not a 90-degree angle, which is obviously the preferable alignment. It's in fact about a 60-degree angle as it currently stands. And we were requested to review whether it could be modified to make it into either somewhere between 75 and 85 degrees as an intersection angle rather than the current alignment. We actually did do that analysis and we submitted it to the city. And what it would do is it would bring the roadway down in a steeper curve. And again, remember, there's also, you're coming downhill at the same time. The net result, and this was done going from 60 degrees to 80 degrees. So your condition suggested 75. Some of it would be slightly ameliorated, but not really by much. But going to an 80-degree intersection, as this does, what it would do is it would change the slope of the road from a 6% slope to a 9% slope. What it would do for the sidewalk that runs on our side of the road along here would go from something more than, slightly more than 6% to definitely more than 9% because you're on the inside curve. So it's more like 10%, something like that. As you can also see, it truly this, you can see a little bit over here on this side of the road. This is where our property line is right now. So it is eliminating what we've all been discussing literally for years, that node of interest that was right at the prominent Porsche location right at the intersection that kind of opens up to the North 7 development. So it goes away. And instead you end up with more significant retaining walls that would have to be included. And if we went so far not only to have our engineer look at this, but then to have our landscape architect do it. And so what you have down below, this is our proposed plan. It shows that node of interest with the seating area and landscaping. And then this is what we would end up with that 80-degree realignment. There's a couple of other problems that occur with that realignment in addition to the increase in the slope and the increase in retaining walls. It would also require a cut of about 6 to 12 inches in the grade of the roadway. And that is not just a cut in the grade of the roadway, but there's the existing high pressure water main and gas main that are located under the roadway, and they would also need to be reconfigured and buried further below. And the problem further is that even if you did this to the 80 degrees, it would not make the intersection meet the DOT standards for horizontal and vertical curvature. And we've submitted that information to DOT and TMP. So you're not getting a compliant intersection anyway. So we suggest that there are no documented issues with this intersection as it currently exists. And frankly, we're not going to create any more of an issue ourselves. We do have an exit from our parking garage that goes out to Oakwood Avenue, but that parking garage is solely for tenant vehicles. So you're only talking about passenger vehicles and small, pickup trucks, if anything. All of our service vehicles go into the service court, the loading area that is directly off of Glover Avenue. So there is no truck traffic that would be coming down Glover Avenue to the south and then turning right onto Oakwood, or that would be coming down Oakwood and then turning left onto Glover to head north. That is just not a turning movement that any truck from our development is going to cause. So we're not creating any further problem. We're not exacerbating any further problem. It's just not something that actually serves a good purpose. We're happy to do the exercise to show how it would work, but frankly, we think that the existing intersection alignment with the node of interest is the preferable way to go. The other thing is that we're very reluctant to consider making improvements of this type that would create a greater, steeper slope, because frankly, we're concerned about liability that may be associated with that if somebody starts rolling down the sidewalk or slips down the hill on ice because it's now a steeper roadway than it was before. So we really don't feel that this is an appropriate thing to do. What we are willing to suggest and have made the offer is if the commission wants to preserve the option for this to be done in the future, we will again grant the city an easement over our property so that that can be done. Now recognize that if it is done, we'll eliminate the node of interest, and the commission may not be interested in opening that Pandora's box. But if the commission felt that it would be appropriate to preserve that option, we would be willing to grant an easement to the city over our property at no expense so that that could be done in the future.
Question related to this intersection.
Sure.
The The reason for wanting to redesign this intersection was to increase safety and reduce conflict points. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, typically it is obviously preferable to have a 90-degree intersection rather than something that's more acute than that. It allows for better sight lines theoretically, although the sight lines really are still acceptable under either alternative. They're acceptable now, and they would be acceptable at an 80-degree angle instead. Yes, it's kind of as a general theory, the more that you can have as a 90-degree angle, that would be a better thing to be.
Understood. Can you go back to the prior graphic real quick?
Sure. This one?
Yeah. Yes. So in the bottom center, so right at the like current proposed and not the alteration.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's a proposed crosswalk right there.
Correct.
Maybe instead of proposing to alter the intersection, instead maybe look at having that be a raised crosswalk or something to slow traffic along Glover to make that left turn a bit safer, and maybe that would reduce the sightline requirements and make that intersection safer.
We would be willing to consider that. Certainly, we do have, you can see it right here. This is the raised crosswalk that's right at the train station. I'm not sure if one this close is a good idea or not, but certainly it's worth considering. We would be open to that.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
And this again, we've shown you this graphic before, but this just is a reminder of what that node of interest that we all wanted to see is and where it is. And frankly, I think that we really do want to keep it. We think that it's important to the project, and we think it's important to the community too. The next topic that we wanted to discuss was that, again, there was a TMP request to create a drop-off area in front of the building, and that's reflected in condition 11 of your site plan resolution. What was requested was that we propose and design a drop-off area between the area where the driveway is into our garage for tenants and the driveway into the area for the loading area. And actually what you have right here, this is the entrance to the building right in this location. So we had our engineers look at it, and they came back with a plan that shows this is exactly what would be required in order to do this. The theory that TMP had was that what they don't want is people stopping to drop people off or to drop off food or, the typical Amazon or Uber or whatever it may be, to then be stopping on the street and blocking traffic. And so they felt that a pull-off area would be an appropriate thing to do. There's a couple of problems with that. One of them is that, as we know, we've designed this building to be as close to the front setback as we possibly can get. And that's because the desire is to bring the building right up to the street. Now, if you take 7 feet off of that area between the face of the building and the curb line, you create a very narrow area of public sidewalk. So it really detracts from the area. The other thing is that we actually kind of don't need it, because right over here, right across the street, is a drop-off area. This is the Kiss and Drive area that is for the train station. And where most of the time that people would be using it for drop-offs of either people or food or whatever it may be, is mostly going to be at times that the train is not there. And the train, frankly, although we would love to see it more frequently, is only there once every half hour or hour anyway. And the other part to it is that, especially as it relates to things like food drop-offs, the most of the food, I suspect, will be coming from the south, from Main Avenue down at the south end, not from going from the grist mill at the north end in this particular location. So people are going to be driving north on Glover to drop things off anyway. The other thing to remember is that we have a loading area that is right here. The thing that is usually the problem with drop-offs is not so much the Ubers and the food drop-offs as much as it is the Amazons and those things. Well, not only are we requiring the service providers to use our loading area, but we're actually incentivizing them to do that, because where the package center and mail center are for this building is right off of the loading area. So it makes no sense for them to try and park someplace on the street when they have a convenient parking area in the loading area, and it's right where they need to take things anyway. So they don't have to haul it around the building to get into the loading area.
Attorney
So-
Waters, is there staff there 24/7? Like, is there a
Yes.
door person? Can I assume that they'll be monitoring or watching for that, and part of their job is if people are illegally parked or not to sort of deal with that?
Yes, absolutely, Mr. Cantor. That is the case. That it is we have a concierge there. It would be 24/7.
Thank you.
And
And
just,
David, you'll have, I assume, signage leading people there?
yes, Mr. Schulman. And one of the comments that I know that we still owe you is a signage package. We have a general signage package that is part of the master plan. We're still developing exactly what we're going to have for this building that will be consistent with that master plan package. And we'll come back to you with that, but we definitely will include, where deliveries are to go, and no parking along the front of the street and things like that. We agree completely on all of that. One of the things that I wanted to show you, this was a view that we had showed you the last hearing that we were at about a month ago. And this shows you, this right here is the front entrance to the building. Now, it actually, one of the things that we have agreed to as part of our response to the comments from your consultant is that we have recessed that. It hasn't, you don't see it here on this rendering, but we have agreed that we will recess the front back so that it actually enhances the entrance. But that being said, what I wanted to point out is that what you see here, and you can see down here, there's like a white truck that's going into the service area right there. But what you see here, the trees, the street trees that you see there, the light poles that you see there, the brick pavers that you see there, all of that would go away if you had a bump out in this location for a drop-off zone. And what you'd be left with is basically your 5-foot wide sidewalk in front of the building. And we don't think that that's an appropriate or accommodating street scape. And we really feel strongly that given the fact that there are alternatives, that we should use those rather than creating a bump out here. The next topic, we just wanted to talk briefly about condition number 17 of your site plan resolution references hurricane-resistant EIFS. We are, as you know, under the design guidelines, not permitted to use EIFS on the ground floor, but we are permitted to use it above the ground floor. There is some belief that hurricane-resistant EIFS is somehow better, higher quality, something of the sort like that, than other EIFS. But really, and we've gone back and consulted with the technical people on both architectural and manufacturing. Hurricane-resistant EIFS just means that there's more mesh within the material to prevent flying objects from penetrating into the building. It doesn't, first of all, we're not in a hurricane zone, so we don't need to use hurricane resistant EIFS anyway. But there is no difference in the quality, in the appearance, in the maintenance, or in the useful life of the EIFS, whether it's hurricane resistant or not. It just means that a projectile won't go through the building. And since, again, we're only proposing this for above the first floor, it's not likely that we're going to have a car driving into the ephes or something else of the sort where additional structural support would be appropriate. All it really does, if you insist upon hurricane-resistant ephes in this location, is add weight to the building and add cost. But it doesn't do anything that really is of any benefit to anybody. So we would ask that you reconsider that condition. The next topic that we'd like to discuss is condition number 18 of the site plan resolution. And that has to do with the use of natural turf or artificial turf. And we are proposing the use of artificial turf in one location, which is right back here behind the pavilion building. It's actually part of the flow through from the town square area over to the dog park. Just to be clear, the artificial turf that we're proposing is just as pervious as natural turf is. So it's not as if we are creating a drainage issue or something where it would prevent the recharge into the soil. But what this does, this area here does, is it allows for a variety of other activities that can occur. And it's activities that can occur purely because they're on this type of turf. Whether it's a Frisbee game or a croquet or whatever it may be, but it also is an area that is going to be very highly trafficked, we expect, because it's right off of Town Square. One of the things that we talked about in one of our earlier meetings was to be able to make Town Square as flexible as possible so that when we have things like a farmer's market or a movie night or things like that, that you can actually expand beyond just the physical confines of Town Square itself as appropriate. So you can actually have a movie and people can sit on the AstroTurf, things like that, although it wouldn't be AstroTurf. We're not using that particular brand. But but again, it's a heavily trafficked area. And therefore, frankly, from our experience here in Stamford, it needs to be an artificial turf because you just can't keep sod alive in that area. And if you can't keep it alive, then it detracts, and all you're doing is replacing it once a month. And that's a considerable expense in and of itself. So we would again suggest that this area, and it's only this area, we've created green roofs on the roofs, we've created a dog park, which is all natural. But in this particular area, we believe that this is an appropriate component because it allows for greater flexibility and it allows for us to maintain it in a better way. And the last point that I wanted to raise directly with you, although we're happy to discuss anything else, condition 20 of your site plan resolution has to do with the workforce housing requirements. We have provided to your staff our proposed workforce housing affordability plan. The plan itself is literally word for word the same one that we've used at the curb up at the north end of Glover and at One Glover at the south end of Glover. So the language is not an issue to anybody, I don't believe. What we have done is we have not proposed to place any of the workforce housing units on the very top floors of the building, the 11th and 12th floors. And while we have dispersed them throughout the remaining 10 floors, we just don't feel that a penthouse apartment is necessarily a requirement for dispersion of the units throughout the building. That said, what we have proposed is that we are providing the full 10% workforce housing units proportionately allocated by unit type. And so with 266 residential units, that is a total of 27 units. And actually, under your regulations, we would only have been required to provide 26. because one of the units is a 3-bedroom unit, and that counts as 2. So in exchange and in recognition of the fact that we are not providing any of the workforce housing units on the top floors, the 11th and 12th floors, we are proposing that we would give you an additional workforce housing unit beyond what we would otherwise be required to provide.
And
we-
how many units are there on the 11th and 12th floor?
The 12th floor is very limited, Mr. Schulman. I don't actually have the number right offhand. I can see if I can find it. Because if you remember, the 12th floor is only this area. It's not where the 2 grass roofs areas are, and it's not this area, which is an 11-story area. So I believe I don't even want to guess. Let me find that for you, and I'll provide it. And the 11th floor is a full floor in that it goes both. It's basically the T that is here, but it does not again include the full length of the building because the 2 ends are only 5 stories tall.
I can't speak for anyone else. I feel uncomfortable, however, excluding the most desirable and what I expect will be the most expensive units from the requirement for workforce housing. But we can get into that when the commission takes up the project during our action phase.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with that, those were the items that I wished to discuss with you, but obviously we are available to discuss further the things that are of interest to you and to respond as appropriate.
I have a question about the building. You've gone from, or you're requesting to go from 2 buildings to a single building. Certainly there must have been savings involved in putting everything into 1 building as opposed to 2. Can you quantify that for us?
No idea. Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. No idea, because in fact, you still do have some rather significant expenses that you've now added areas that, I mean, we've also reduced the steps over in these areas, but we've increased the building both in size and in height to 11 stories here. So I have no way of knowing how you would quantify that.
Well, I would assume, well, I'm not a developer, and so I don't know either, but it seems to me as a businessman that you had some idea of what it was going to cost to put up each of the buildings. So what I'm asking is what is the cost of this building as opposed to what you estimated the cost of building the first building and the second building to be?
Because of the fact that when we initially started evaluating building 1.2 and realized that it really was a non-viable building, we didn't get to a point of what would it cost to construct it because we never designed it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Commission members have any other questions at this point?
Steve has his
I have
hand up.
Just I did a quick look, and unless I was looking at the older version of the plans, it looks like 24 units on 11 and 12.
That sounds right.
Can you say that again, Steve? Sorry.
24 units on 11 and 12. 24 each, I should specify.
So 48 units.
Correct.
Well, again, I suggest that as commission, we discuss that when we're talking about action. Again, I'm uncomfortable with that. Again, I don't know how the rest of you feel. Are there any other questions?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman. Was I the only one that dropped out of the meeting just now? I guess so.
As far as I know.
It just folded up. David, just a quick question. I don't know if you can answer this, but do you know what the dog population is now? And what you expect it to be when this building's finished?
A good question. I would say that in our I asked this question based on what the population is in Stamford. It's usually somewhere around 1 dog per 4 units.
So how does that work out?
So at
How many units we have, or 200?
About 50 or 60.
yeah, so
50 or
something
60
like that.
dogs.
And remember that this will be a facility that is used not just by this building, but obviously it's very proximate to the next building just to the north that will be built too.
Thank you.
Lou, can we talk with Bob at this point, or can we ask questions to him, or?
Well, Bob is going to give a presentation.
Gotcha, okay,
When David's finished.
and I'll hold off.
Okay. Any other questions then for David? And let me say that Bob is going to speak, but after Bob's, any time up until we close off this portion of the hearing, feel free, if you have questions, to address them to Attorney Waters. That's why he's here. He's here to answer our questions. But if there are no other questions at this point, I would ask Bob to speak about his review. Mr. Griswitz?
I'm here. I'm trying to unmute.
You just muted yourself. There you go.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Just to answer a part of your question, Mr. Chairman, as far as the reduced cost of the 1 building versus 2 buildings, it's certainly at least the 10,000 square feet of retail that's been deleted from the project. So you can multiply that by some number and you would get a start of a savings that this 1 building has. The review of the project, I don't want to take very much time here. You've been given the initial review of the project. You've been given the revised review of the project, and then a 3-page extract from that revision, which I'm sorry that there wasn't time to give you more time to read that. But nonetheless, that's what you have. And I would have to apologize on the last page, page 40, of both the extract and the full revised report. With the changes, it's hard to explain how you develop this, but the text is independent of the crossouts. So the crossouts on the last page don't align with what's meant to be crossed out. And I think what's happening is if you move the crossouts 2 lines up, it works. But I'm not really sure because I haven't checked all of them. So there are a number of things. First of all, I suppose what's interesting here is this is the first test of something that's new in the design guidelines, design standards rather, for North 7 that's different than other districts, and that's the mathematical calculation of reducing the mass of the building as you go higher. This building does, I'm looking, I don't know if, Dave, do you want to put up that rendering from the south? Because it kind of shows the building well.
What did they do with it?
In any case, we put that in the standards to try to get something quantifiable, just like in other districts where it's you have to step back at the 5th floor or above. This is a little more, there you go. Oh,
Got what you look for?
that one, yes. Here we actually have in the standards a mathematical amount that the building must reduce its footprint and must reduce its footprint in the visible areas from the street. And while this isn't exactly, this is a way that we hadn't anticipated, shall we say, the massing stepping back, but this does meet all of our requirements that way. So it's interesting to see that way. And I think it certainly is better than just a slab building going all the way up and getting cut off at the top. We could go into a lot of design discussion if any of the commissioners want, but to keep it brief, we had the basic review. We went through, found a large number, larger than typical, let's say that, larger than typical for these reviews, number of unresolved issues, which totaled 28 at the time of the initial review. There was a supplemental information given at the end of last Friday, and going through that was able to eliminate a number, but by no means all of the questions that were brought up. Let me just talk a little bit about the importance of that second building. And Dave has done an admirable job of arguing for why it shouldn't be there. Now, why should it be there? Because this is the commercial center, to the extent that there is a commercial center, of this entire neighborhood. When this neighborhood is done, and this is from the not from the master plan, this is from the report that we did 4 years ago for the commission, you'll have somewhere around 2,700 units of housing in the immediate area and another 2.4 million square feet of office space. So a total of over 5 million square feet of building. And if the master plan was followed to the letter, there would be, now I'm looking, there would be 51,514 square feet, which is, I think that comes out to about 1% of the building area being, no, maybe that's 0.1%. It's a very small amount. Okay, so in a supplemental position paper, if you will, I can't remember what we called it, that we gave you just on this master plan change, we gave you an example of how to think about the distance between building 1 and building 2 if there isn't a building 1.2 in between. And it's a full football field, including the end zones. Now that may register with some people, may not register with other people, but that's a long distance to ask somebody to walk without having something interesting to do on the way, to something that's drawing them along, something that's making them say, I want to go that distance. Not that I have to go that distance, but I want to see what's the next 10 feet. I want to see what's the next 20 feet. To give you another idea of how far that is, in the, and I have this up on my screen here, but you can picture it. The Sono Collection, your new mall, that 360 feet is about 2/3 the distance between Bloomingdale's and Nordstrom's. You're asking people to walk that without having anything to draw them along. And I know Dave says that the puppies are good, and puppies are very nice. In my past life, I designed retail in places like the Sono Collection. And we would put the puppies right up in the front, but we'd never expect somebody to walk more than 50 feet to see the puppies. So you really, and as you know, if you're going in any retail environment, and Dave says as much with the saying nothing worse than a blank storefront, an empty store, is if you're going along something like a mall, like a street front, and you've got gaps. Gaps are deadly. Gaps, you can live with 25 feet. 50 feet starts getting to be a little bit, it looks pretty vacant. So we would just recommend very, very strongly that the commission think about this, discuss it, and think about how you would want to walk that street.
Well, Bob, can you just, or I generally get what you're saying and generally agree, but I struggle a little bit with the notion that PLT is saying they're not going to do anything if said to put something there, right? It'll effectively be a building that is vacant. And is something that is vacant that houses, I don't know what, you know what I mean? Like, how do you deal with the zombie nature of it? Because that feels worse to me, but I could be.
Oh,
It also sort of feels like a threat.
I'm sorry, what is a threat?
We'll just leave the building vacant.
Well, the tough thing, you are making a decision based on how the city will be, I won't say forever, but for decades. Yes, retail is harder to fill now. There's no question about it, but it is filling. And when we say it's retail, it's commercial space. And quite frankly, in this location, restaurant makes a lot more sense than retail right now. But it might change. But you have to plan for what city do you ultimately want, not what's convenient right now. And that I think is the answer to that is pretty clear. As a small detail, but one detail, and certainly was not the position, our responsibility or the position of our analysis to try to design what that building is, just that a continuous street front is very important. And as far as that drawing, I believe it came out of the planning and zoning for the 2 pavilions versus 1. If you had 3, you'd probably be just about right there. 3 of the size that they show, you would at least be fronting up to the square. Remember, the square originally was fronted on 2 full sides with commercial space that would activate the space. One entire side has been taken away, and as the space as a result is one of those 1970s urban renewal spaces, just sort of dribbles out and isn't defined, isn't activated. So what I was going to say was that as far as one thing, which Dave mentioned, the parking for this, if it was done, 10,000 square feet, is in building 1. There is enough parking and that's in the basic report, that there is enough parking to meet that requirement. Having said that, trying to think what else you need to know here. I guess questions would be a really good thing. But in any case, so 28 points, maybe 10 or 12, I felt were fully met. The others still required some additional information, or in many cases, the applicant was saying that they would do something. And so this was just reinforcing, yes, this is the thing that they would do.
Bob, Steve, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, and this can be, obviously Attorney Waters can address this after, but what staff had sent them was an example of something they could do. They could rotate the pavilion building 90 degrees to square off the square, so to speak, and then add another liner building or 2 along there. But I didn't see any response outside of just didn't think it was going to work. So I think there is potential to do something there, but I think really it's up to you guys to decide what you want to see in that space.
If the parking is in the larger building and there's no parking in the smaller building, how far do you have to walk from the parking to get to the retail in the smaller building?
I would guess that, okay, so you think about that would be the width of the square. So if the square is 100 feet wide, which is what it was originally, and then some additional, maybe you're 200 feet. I mean, where are you parking in the building? That's another question, but.
Well, also, when I see this, when I read about it, I don't imagine people driving there to necessarily go to the retail and the restaurants and then parking in the building and walking from their car, but that this is where people live. So they might not have taken their car out for a day or 2 or 3. It's about walking maybe on their way to the train, but not necessarily on their way to the train, to a restaurant or to retail. I think the idea was for these to be fairly walkable areas for the people who live there. I saw the point of if you put buildings over there, there's no sort of loading and unloading and stock and garbage. But I think that's something that needs to get figured out. If the idea was to have this whole area, like if you look at the pictures, the original ideas, it was like to have retail all along the bottom and have multiple buildings and almost like a grid, kind of grid, and an activated like mini city area. This doesn't read mini city to me.
Nick?
Bob, can you sort of articulate what's the risk of not doing it? Like what happens where you've seen people or cities or master plans like this do it wrong?
Oh, well, what happens is people won't walk it. They won't go up and down. It will be worse for whatever is in buildings 2 and 3 because people won't walk past building 1. So in one sense, it's that spaces won't be used. I mean, this is in a way that classic urban renewal, urban space. Oh, it's programmable. Yeah, people don't work that way. You know, and you can look at them. In New Haven, God knows we got Knights of Columbus Square. Not much happens there. Now it's okay if you're setting off a monumental building, but no amount of programming is going to fill it enough that it feels active. It would be unfair to compare things like the Capitol in Albany, New York, which has a wonderful big plaza that's architecturally wonderful.
Yeah, it's like 7 football fields in itself.
Yeah. So it's that.
All right, JJ? Go ahead, JJ.
Yes. I just wanted to say that I in particular don't have a problem with you know, the type of retail that they want to offer. You know, I know right now it's very hard to fill those spaces with different types of clothing, retail and such. So if they want to do restaurants, I just would not like to see that whole area become exclusive, where it becomes its own mini neighborhood, because then it cuts them off from all the other resources on Main Avenue. And then those who are shopping, who work along Main Avenue, they may not feel, you know, that they could utilize those resources on Glover because it seems like its own little mini neighborhood. So, I mean, I would not want that to develop into something exclusive.
Mr. Chairman, that just to finish the thought that I had. The other big thing is when you don't have the continuous active streetscape with places that people want to go every 25, every 50 feet, they go somewhere else. So instead of doing exactly what Anna said, come out of their building, walk down the street, go to dinner, do things in their neighborhood, they'll get in their car. They'll go somewhere else. Maybe it'll be Sono. Maybe it'll be in Stanford.
And
but you got to provide that.
There's a lot of great restaurants and retail all over surrounding that area. So like you said, they would have the opportunity to engage and to patronize those other stores. Now, getting back to Lou's comment about workforce housing, is now a good time to comment on that, Bill, Lou?
We can talk about it now.
Right. I was thinking about that in terms of how the building is designed. And if they are, if this penthouse apartment, that has views of, a lakefront or views of a park or views of a horizon that the bottom floor does not have, then of course they're charging more for that because that is basically premium. So I particularly don't have a problem with them separating those two. And I would be hard pressed that anyone in workforce, who's seeking workforce housing would want to challenge that very notion that I should have a penthouse apartment.
I think I see it a little differently on the workforce housing front, where if it were like multiple floors or balconies, like in even here in this project, right? If I'm not mistaken, there's like some ground floor units that have their own entrance, if I'm remembering correctly. I think some of those are marked for workforce housing, and so like I see those as like a variety of amenities. Same with like the penthouse, it's like a different amenity in the building. And I'd like to see the workforce housing kind of spread out across the building and the amenities that are available. And I just see penthouse as a different type of amenity, but
right. It's a different type of amenity. It's more upscale. I mean, I think if they were talking about separate entrances or less quality apartment or not access to the pool area, or the dog park, I would say by all means, that's an issue that needs to be reversed. We need to definitely make sure that, everyone has access to the same resources. However, a penthouse apartment is something altogether different.
I agree with JJ.
As do I.
Maybe the 11th floor isn't really a penthouse. That's sort of a compromise. No workforce housing on the 12th floor, but one on the 11th floor.
If I may interject, just virtually all the views are the same. They probably get a little bit better towards the top. The 12th floor has 1 foot higher floor to floor, so 1 foot higher ceilings, but all the other floors have the same height ceilings. So that may help your thinking.
Right. So if the higher floor has, higher ceilings and therefore more square footage, I think that should be one of the benefits of paying more rent for that.
Actually, that's cubic footage, not square footage.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the correction.
Mr. Chairman, I have a quick question.
Sure, go ahead, Richard.
Actually, I'm not a believer in filling every square inch with a building. And I love dog parks. I mean, I really feel like that's a tremendous amenity and an attraction to people. But I'm not an architect either, so I can't. I've always admired our I don't want to say your name wrong, Griswiz. I always admired his presentations, and this is the first time I'm sitting here with a big question mark in my head because I really loved the presentation last time, and I kind of really go along with what Attorney Waters had to say about the dog park. But I wonder to myself, given the size of this project and how it's kind of changing as things go along, I wonder if it's possible that the area in front of the dog park might be developed later on, if it was feasible to fill it with something and just see how it goes. I mean, the reality of the situation is when they made this presentation, I don't know how many years ago it was for their own zone. I thought, boy, somebody's got a lot of guts planning on the state of Connecticut doing improvements to a highway and basing that on their presentations. But that's what they've done, and they're willing to proceed with this development in the hopes that the state does what it says it's going to do so they can finish it. So I don't know. I just feel like they've got a lot invested in this to make it as good as it can be. And if I was a tenant, I think I'd really rather have a dog park than a little restaurant, but that's me. I love dogs. And I like going to dog parks.
Mr. Chairman, just one other thing for the commission to think about. The original, purely by coincidence, the original master plan in terms of its build out, its relationship to the sidewalk and its continuity is virtually identical to what your current zoning would require. So you have an independent consultant's recommendation that is now approved as zoning for Norwalk that would call for exactly that.
Thank you. Brian?
It's a question for Attorney Waters. Does the curb have any like dog amenities or anything like that, or no?
Yes, there is a dog park up at Building A at 150 Glover.
Bob, do you have any views on the debate around utilities being buried and whatnot?
Oh, on other projects, to be honest with you, I missed it. In maybe not having quite the amount of documentation that we had on other projects, because I know I brought that up on other projects, and certainly I would think that the utilities should be buried. Who pays for it? I don't care, but they shouldn't be there. And actually, an interesting thing, I'm sorry to always bring New Haven into too many conversations, but one of the beautiful things that New Haven did early in the 20th century is within the downtown area, they said all utilities are underground. And it was a very wise move.
So I just have another quick question. We spend a lot of time talking about the dog park. So what resources are available for people as far as people parks?
Well, the town square is clearly the focal point of this phase of the development. If you remember, there will also be a larger park that is up further to the north that will be
Okay.
part of a future development. But clearly, as far as as town square is concerned, we have plans to program it quite extensively. We've done that down here in Stamford with the areas that we have here, and so we kind of know what tenants are looking for, and then we are flexible because when they say, gee, would like to do yoga in the park, we can do that. And if they want a farmer's market, we can do that. And food trucks, we can do that. So we have some flexibility in all of this, but we actually down here in Stamford, we hired the people that program Bryant's Park in New York to advise us as to what would be the best way to program our facilities here in Stamford, and that's been working very well.
JJ, to your maybe a little bit off your question, but I think what we have to look at is this project has to be able to stand on its own. That's number one. But number two, we also have to think forward about how it fits into the whole. And I think that's the point that Bob's trying to make regarding an additional building. I mean, I do have some concerns about blocking that dog park. I think it may well interfere with activation. But I do think we also need something else as part of this development, maybe slightly further north. I'm not certain what that is.
I'm looking at a memo that says that this area parks are prohibited. Is that correct? The 4-page memo from February 20th.
The current your new zoning for this type of zone, this CD4, Community Development 4, I believe, says that parks are not to be part of private land. Now they could be on public land, I guess, And I think that, when you come up to Raccoon Creek, that's appropriate place for a park, no question about it. And that's always included in the plan. But yes, the zoning specifically excludes parks and playfields because it doesn't want those big open spaces in the street front.
But
Yeah, I
Ann,
think I
we
keep
have, we have to be a little bit careful
Yeah.
because we, at this point anyway, we've approved this under the old zoning regulations.
Right. Just like looking at everything, it does seem like the intention was for this to be a mini neighborhood, not necessarily exclusive, where people aren't allowed or wouldn't want to leave, or other people aren't allowed or wouldn't want to come in, but like any neighborhood, and in Norwalk, we love our little neighborhoods. The idea is that you could go walk a block or two to a pharmacy. You don't have to drive to Connecticut Avenue for that. And I think keeping that in mind is important. Did Steve have his hand raised at one point? Did he
Yeah,
already
Steve-
speak?
Steve's already spoken. Any other comments? Bob?
To let the public go, Mr. Chairman, just a reminder.
Sure. Bob, any more? Anything more to say?
No, if there are other questions, I'm here.
Okay. Are there any other questions at this point?
Sorry, last question for Bob. Generally, like design of the building writ large, like generally seems supportive, like the general arc of it, like seems like a nice piece of
Generally,
architecture.
yes. Reservations about the drive-it. And once again, this is one of those things where if you read, and not to say that this falls under new zoning, but it does guide you as to what values you're going to have to, what questions you're going to be faced with in the future. Is new zoning says traditional stucco, which is stucco on masonry, which is like inch and a half thick, cementitious, textured, tough stuff. That's an acceptable material. It's silent on drive-it. It doesn't approve drive-it. It doesn't disapprove drive-it. So once you've got this approved as drive-it, it's going to be something other people are going to want to do. You have to assume that. So far, all the projects that we've reviewed have not had drive-it. Nobody's been interested in that. The
Then
interest
what's the
might change.
problem or with that material?
It's, it's hard to articulate. And I'm sorry, it's hard to articulate, but one of the standards that comes up in all of the design standards and that we specifically had in these design standards was a building should be rendered in texture and depth. That is generally, it comes out of real materials going together in real ways. If you think about any building that you've seen that you've liked, and you say, oh, look how the lintel sits, looks how the sill sits. And again, your new zoning specifically talks about lintels and sills. Look how a door is anchored to something. Look how it's framed out. All of that goes away with drive-it. Now it's all just white or gray or black. And there may be issues in the long term with durability. There may not. I'm not able to say that. And I have used drive-it on designs that I've done in the past, but it's been in very limited areas where we're clearly trying to make something look different than the real materials around it. So that's
What percentage of this building is in that material? Is
90,
the whole
90
building
plus.
is in that material.
Everything except for the first floor along the street. Yeah.
Nick, I did talk to another different architect, sorry, Bob, that does work with used this on another project, and so they, over the long term, they haven't had any issues on the building.
Okay. That's good to hear.
What was long term to them?
It's at least 10 years so far.
Any other questions? If not, we'll open it up to the public, but before I do, let me alert the public that anyone who spoke at the last hearing can only speak to new information that we discussed tonight. Anyone who has not spoken before may speak about anything regarding this project. With that, Brian, do you want to explain how people can access the opportunity to speak?
Yeah, so for anyone from the public who would like to speak, you can use the raise your hand tool. It's at the bottom of your screen. You would click that once. And if you're dialing on a phone, you would hit *9. We have our former commission member.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Mike.
Okay, Mike Mushak, 50 Elmwood Avenue, and former Planning and Zoning Commissioner until New Year's Eve a couple months ago. And I sat through many of these presentations, so I'm going to speak totally as a private citizen now. And I want to just add that I've known Attorney Waters for a long time, but I have no personal relationship with him or any personal interest or relationship with BLT. But Attorney Waters and I go back on talking about the intersection of 7 and the Merritt. We sat on a steering committee anyway, it's a long story, but I've known him a long time, but that's it. So I'm going to speak in support of the text amendment or application, whatever heading you're using for this. But I recall speaking directly to the effect of walking along a large open space. I was going to compare it to Central Park in New York. So I'm going to contradict Bob and his otherwise very good advice, and I've utmost respect for him. But I and as a landscape architect, I totally understand activating urban spaces and walkways at regular intervals. There's no question about that. But I think that this opening up the town square and having the dog park there is a plus. It makes this otherwise, larger building, which is going to be a result of this, seem balanced. And I know that can go back to the tower and the park failed urban renewal plans, which you were referring to. And I know many of you may not know the history of that, but in the 50s, it was putting towers in parks and then having lots of open space around. And it's kind of in many ways, it was a failed attempt at planning. It actually did come out of New Haven and their School of Architecture. So we can blame them for a lot, but I always felt that if you walk down Fifth Avenue or Central Park West, it's a relief to get away from the city. And those sidewalks, which are just miles long, if you know the length of Central Park, they're always active. And they're active with people just listening to birds and walking under trees. And I think this whole area, and to JJ's point and Richard's point, and other people that have made the same point, it is part of a larger mixed use area. And I always thought that this project was going to provide mostly residential to the commercial over on Main Avenue. Now that the train station has the connection, which I assume is going to be open 24 hours. I hope it is. But that the commercial becomes on Main Avenue becomes more activated. It wasn't necessary to create a self-contained town center here with all of the services and all of the retail that population might support, because then you would be stealing business away from the very large commercial area right over through the office buildings over on Main Avenue. So I always saw this whole area as the office is there. This is adding residential. Commercial is on Main Avenue. It has some commercial, but it wasn't needed to have all of it. And the length of space that the sidewalk would have. I mean, I brought up a serpentine sidewalk at one of the meetings. Attorney Waters thought that was a good idea. I don't see it on the plan, but in any case, I would suggest the simplest kind of solution would be putting in informational signs or interpretive signs, they're called, which would give the history of the area. The area has a very interesting history, industrial history, and then Native American history, and have signs every 20 feet. That you would have an outdoor museum that could be something that would be a destination. And it's a few $1,000s worth of signs. It's not a huge investment. And I think that's one way to activate that. And we did that in Pine Island Cemetery. When we redirected the Norwalk River Valley Trail through the cemetery, we designed signs. I did that as a volunteer, but we put signs in, and people read them all the time, and they go to that cemetery to look at it. And I know this isn't a cemetery, but I'm just saying signage and creating a historical outdoor museum with signs with photos on them, graphic signs, not too much information, but just something to have to punctuate the sidewalk. I think that would be fine. I like the idea of the dog park and the open space and the pavilion and everything the way it is. I think it's smart. And I think all of this is actually smart growth. And I think the Oakwood Avenue solution is, I'm glad that it's going to stay with that node at that point. So that's all I want to say. I do support the application as it is. I mean, as it looks, because of all those reasons. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mike.
If anyone else is interested in speaking, use the raise your hand tool. It's at the bottom of your screen. You'd press that once. I don't see anyone on a phone, but if you were, you'd hit *9. Doesn't seem like anyone else, Mr. Schulman.
Okay, then we'll go back to Attorney Waters. We'll close out the public portion, public comment portion of the hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I have very few things to comment. One of them, the comment about a mini neighborhood is actually the whole basis of what we started with, which is that we want to be an inclusive neighborhood that includes not just the properties that we own and are developing, but also the properties up on Sear Hill and Oakwood that are in single family ownership and condominium ownership, and also to incorporate the Merit 7 developments as well. And one of the things that allowed us to do that is the fact that the train station is now open, and you can actually cross as a pedestrian, where before you could stand on the plaza deck at Merit 7 and throw a rock and hit the area where the train station was, but you couldn't get there unless you wanted to walk a mile around the Glover Avenue. But yeah, again, it is not to become exclusive, it is to become inclusive, and to really create that and to actually support the businesses that are on Main Avenue. And that now can happen because we have the ability to gain that access through the Merit 7. In fact, it's interesting, we've noticed that since the train station has been open, there are a number of people that now will come from Merit 7 across to the Glover Avenue area at lunchtime and what have you, to start walking in that area. So it is actually happening the way that we would hope that it would, and we're looking forward to more of that. I wanted to just reiterate one thing about leaving a proposed building vacant. That if it was implied as a threat, it certainly is not. The one thing that I can tell you is that as a developer, a representative of a developer, that developers would not do that to cut off their nose to spite their face. They certainly want to develop and occupy buildings so that they can actually get rent and income from it and make it more valuable for the area as well. So I'm just saying that in our experience, it is very difficult to rent out and have occupied the type of retail that would be contemplated for a building of that type. And so it is more likely than not that it will be very difficult to rent it and very difficult to find somebody to occupy it. But it certainly, if somebody came to us and said that they wanted to, we would be very happy to accommodate in that respect. You know, we talked about distances to walk to find something interesting. And again, I just say that frankly, I think that walking from the building to the pavilion, which is interesting in and of itself, to the dog park, which is usually occupied, and then eventually from there, you'll be able to walk to the next building, which also has retail in the base of it as it is planned. So it is, in fact, a continuous thing. The thought that, and somebody asked the question, how far would it take to walk from the parking garage within the building to a new pavilion? And I would suggest that that is more than the 320 feet or whatever it is that has been calculated. Because remember, the parking garage access to the building is south of the main entrance to the building. So you're basically walking about 2/3 the length of the building before you even get to Town Square. So all in all, I think that, you know, from our perspective, that we just have a disagreement in philosophy as far as the activation of the area, and we think that that based upon the experience that we've had and what we've done and what we've learned from our developments here in the south end of Stamford, we think that you know, ours is viable and is the best way to do this. So we thank you very much for your time, and if we can answer any other questions, we're happy to do that.
Are there any further questions for
Yes,
Attorney?
I do have one
Sure, go ahead.
question. Okay, so in regards to activation, do you plan to commission any artists to create statues or point of interest along the way? Because you keep circling back to the fact that they, you know, this is a long walk, they need things to see, things to do. And I think art installations is a great way to draw, you know, to keep people's interest as they're walking along. As Mike Mushak mentioned, that, you know, you can have different plaques of interest, just something along the way. It does, you know, very inexpensive, but at the same time, you're bringing beauty, creativity, and art to the neighborhood.
Yes, Commissioner, actually, ironically, that was the whole concept behind the nodes of interest that we depicted in the master plan, and we actually have specific locations for those. And those could be an interesting seating area, or it could be a piece of sculpture, or it could be just an interesting lighting area, or whatever it is. And those are the types of things that have been identified, and we've created locations all the way up the entire master plan where those types of things can occur. So we absolutely agree with you that sculpture is or an artwork of something that is definitely one of the options that is available. And in fact, Merit 7 has a number of sculptures by a specific sculptor. I don't remember his name, but I think that there's another piece of their work that may become available that we've been interested in as well. And that would again help to tie together the Merit 7 with a project with our project.
Yes, thank you.
Chapin?
Hey there. A couple of quick follow-up questions. One is on the amenities. I see that was one of the items that was called out, and since the memo, the revised peer review memo was off by a couple of lines around the crossouts. Maybe that was addressed already by Mr. Griswax, but did you have a chance to review the updated amenity placement, and was that satisfactory to your peer review?
I believe so. We added a couple of bike racks in, as that was one of the requests that was made. We've added some benches, we've added some trash receptacles. The two things that we did not add were charging stations or a water facilities. Frankly, we're hoping that people will go and get water at the pavilion or at a restaurant that is in the building, and charging stations will probably be provided the same way. So we are not providing those, but the other items we have definitely added into our site plan.
Actually, they're not in the submission. So they may be somewhere, but they're not in the submission.
No, they were part of what we submitted to you as part of the last package.
I will guarantee you, I look for all of them in the landscape plans. They're not there.
We can maybe address
We
that.
just bring it up.
I mean, it's easy enough to put them in, so it's not like it's a big deal. It's just, you know, we have a checklist. These are all the things that you find in an urban space. And as far as the two things, the water and the charging stations, bringing that up, they don't have to be there, but that's been the standard in other districts. It's not an unreasonable standard.
Thank you. Was lighting addressed as a part of that? I think there was like 5 additional lights that were suggested.
There were, and we actually have provided that as well in a plan. What we did not yet provide, I literally got it at about 4:45 this afternoon, was a photometric plan, which shows that it will actually cover, and we will be submitting that so that your staff will be able to confirm that it's actually doing what it's supposed to do. But we did add the additional lights that were requested.
I had a question about the charging stations for cars, for electric cars.
Yes.
Where are those going to be located, and how do the residents, they're level 2, so in order to fully charge your car, you have to be plugged in for several hours.
Yep.
Probably overnight.
Mhm.
So how many people do you anticipate might have electric cars who live in the building? How will they access these charging stations? Will they be able to put a credit card in and park there for the evening, for the night?
So the way that it usually works, and by statute, we're required to now provide availability and accessibility to it. But what we have designated in our plans are that 5% of all of the parking within the parking garage is going to be set up with the level 2 charging stations, and another 5% are designated as, if they are needed, if there is a sufficient demand, that they will also be then able to be converted and used as level 2 charging stations as well. So they're actual designated locations that, and people that have electric cars will be the ones that will obviously get the opportunity to use those spaces.
Okay, thank you.
Chapin, I see that your hand is still raised. Did you not have an opportunity to ask all your question?
Last one, I promise.
Go ahead.
Well, at least for this portion. There was, I think, still an outstanding item on the sustainable roofs. And did that come to resolution, the discrepancy in the interpretation of what should be the percentage coverage of the sustainable roof materials?
Yeah, I believe so. We pointed out that you actually have 3 different standards that we have to meet between the design standards and the zoning regulations as it relates to the sustainability, and we meet all of them. We meet there's a requirement as to the overall roof. There's a requirement as to that area that is not used for amenity space. And if I recall correctly, the third one was that it's the amenity space and the green, blue, or solar roof has to be a certain percentage. And we provided the calculations on each of those.
Mr. Rizowak, do you have any comments on that? Sorry, on the sustainable roofing. Oh, sorry, Mr. Schulman. Did you say something?
No, that's perfectly all right.
Is that for me, Chapin? Sorry.
Oh, sorry, that was for Mr. Griswold. Or maybe I'm pronouncing his last name wrong. That was for Bob.
Okay, there's a challenge here. What we tried to write into the standards was something that was over and above what was for the city. Talking with Steve, it seems like the standard that the application meets is the standard for the city, but not what's in the design standards, which is higher. So what the design standards would say is that if there is a roof area that is not used for amenity space, is not used for mechanical, is not green or blue, then it should be solar panels, must be solar panels.
It does not say that. It does not say that in the design standards.
Okay, well, I quoted it in the report and in the revision, and that's
You
what
can
I've
show
seen
me
it
where in
say.
the design standards it is, but I don't see it anywhere.
I don't
Yeah,
know that
I would
it's,
say any discrepancy between what's in the, may or may not be in the design standards and the zoning regulations for the zone, the zoning regulations are going to be the guiding document. I think maybe that's something we want to clear up if there is a discrepancy, but I don't think we need to take care of that tonight.
Okay.
We can condition against that or for that?
Yeah,
Okay.
what they propose is compliant with the zoning regulations.
Okay. Anything else? If not, we will end this public hearing.
Thank you,
And-
Mr. Chairman.
Okay. We move on to action there. As I said earlier, there are two actions. One is to address the question of the master plan, and then to act on the site plan review. And I believe we should do it in that order because we can't approve the site plan review unless we alter the master plan. Steve, we have a resolution for that. Can you put it up so we can discuss it?
Sorry, it was when you were talking, I added in a couple of the conditions that you had talked about in red that we can go through for the site plan specifically.
Steve, a question. As I explained, I had some reservations about the second building and its impact on the dog park and the activation. But the question just came up again about these nodes. Could an additional node help? Maybe not to the level that Bob would like, but might an additional node further help to activate the space?
But it wouldn't hurt. So, I mean, anything you could do to draw interest or reason for people to want to walk, because not everybody, maybe somebody, if the node is interesting enough, would want to walk there just for that. I suppose it's possible. So I don't think there's any harm in it at all.
Okay. Well, when we get to that, let's talk about that.
You're just about there, I think.
That's true. Let's talk about that second pavilion building. What's the sense of the commission members on insisting on that?
I don't insist on it.
Other comments?
I don't either. I think people are going to walk or they're not. And in my experience driving and by the curb, there are very few people out walking, but I don't think putting some node or even a nice sculpture is going to make somebody walk by or not walk by.
Let me ask the question in the reverse. Is there any support for adding a second pavilion building?
I'm really torn on this one.
I mean, honestly, Mr. Schulman, I, from the beginning of this project, have been advocating for more retail because I think that's what activates it. But West Avenue to me has not been very successful with that. It doesn't seem to be the way the market is going. So I'm a little torn too, but I don't think a node is going to make any difference.
Right now, we're not talking about the node. We're talking about the pavilion. And I think you've been clear that you feel the same way about the pavilion. It's not going to make a difference.
Well, Lou, what do you think?
I'm also torn. I do agree that more needs to be done to activate the area. But I'm not sure that a pavilion is the way to go.
I almost wish we can put like a clause in there that after like some amount of time we can revisit that. Like if people are not engaging with that space and not walking, like we can bring back the pavilion or some sort of notion of that or some sort of further activation. But Steve, I don't think we can do anything like that, right?
I'm just thinking, how do we measure that? How do we?
Yeah, like
Well, even if that were the case, how can we be certain that that additional building is going to activate the space?
right. Well, you're making a bet that that's going to do that, right? Like
No.
that you're making a bet one way or the other. And I think you can have the leverage with other parts of the project later on. You know, like tying it into phase 3 or something like that. I don't know. I'm just like, I hear what people are saying about the park, comparing Glover Avenue to Central Park in Manhattan.
I
Maybe
don't
know.
think that's not a fair
Not
comparison.
a fair comparison, although like in concept, sure. So like, and on the other side, I don't know. I'm just really torn on this of like, this is our bite at the apple here. And I
Right.
know BLT wants this site to be as activated as whatnot as well. So there's like an alignment of values here, but I just don't know how to square the circle.
Right.
I think personally, I trust BLT's knowledge of what they can fill and what they can't fill
True.
in terms of space.
Well, you know, I think the whatever animal it is has left the barn on the issue within this building of additional retail. And I'm not happy about that, but I don't think we can do anything about it. I have the sense that the issue with retail may simply be an issue now. Is it going to be an issue 5 years down the road? You know, could more retail have been programmed that might have been successful in 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years? But I think the horses long ago ran out of the barn.
Well, I think what's interesting though is what staff sort of had suggested of like the notion of an artist space, gallery space, whatnot. I don't think that probably commands the same level of rent. So that requires some sort of, I want to say charity. That's the only word I have for that.
Subsidy.
Some subsidy of that nature. Of like, that could be really interesting if, you know, artists are working in there and people are walking by, seeing them, you know, at work. I don't, you know, seeing art in that way, but like, unless those things come together, I just don't know how it
Yeah,
happens.
I like the idea of an artist studio.
Well, we can't insist on what's going to go into a given space. I'd like to hear from other commissioners who've not yet spoken on this issue, so that we can move this forward.
I appreciate Mr. Bushak's contributions, and I think at minimum having some sort of like signage there to activate some of that longer space would be good. You know, a way to acknowledge the history and, you know, give something folks walking along that path could look at. And that does feel like a rather affordable way to maybe fill in a little bit of that gap. I
So,
also wonder. Go ahead. Yeah.
Chapin, does that mean that you don't support the second pavilion?
I'm really torn on it. And so I wonder if maybe instead of a second pavilion, having like an expanded size of the existing one, just so that way, like lengthwise, elongating it in order to fill more of the space so that the gaps aren't as long. To, I don't know, kind of split things a little bit. But also leaving that area, the dog park, open does leave it open in the future for, I don't know, when they come back for part 2 of this project, they could say, okay, we actually want to build a dog park up here on part 2. And that space where we have the dog park, retail's picked up. We would love to put in a building in that space. And so I think I'm leaning more towards not having something, but I do worry about it making a gap that is a self-fulfilling prophecy of, it's not walkable. So we don't encourage more things that make it more walkable. Therefore, it continues to be not walkable and so on. Like, this is our chance for the next 50, 100 years. I think one of the reports read, it's probably going to be built that way for a while. And so I don't know. I'm really torn on it, but that's kind of my train of thought. I don't know if anybody has anything to build off of that or, yeah.
Does anyone object if I ask Steve to eliminate A? That the second,
I'm sorry, I couldn't find my mute before.
go ahead, Anna.
I don't know that I'm in support of revising the master plan, period. Like,
If we don't revise it, this project can't go forward because originally it was to be 2 buildings
right.
and now it's 1 building. And so the master plan, at the very least, has to reflect that.
Mm-hmm. I don't fully buy why it has to be 1 building. And I have concerns about the direction. Like, it seems like there are incremental step-by-step changes that continue to take it away from the planned, I think well thought out vision, big picture vision for the area. Even small things like, oh, we're not going to have water bottle filling stations because we want people to go to the restaurants and pay something to get their water. Like, that's what takes away from a walkable, activated neighborhood.
Well, Anna, we have an opportunity here to put language like that back in.
I would
One
support
to
that.
share. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I would also support the charging stations. It's not a really significant expense for the developer, but it's a nice amenity for anyone using that space. Any other comment on the pavilion building? Steve? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Schulman. I don't say this in jest, but if another pavilion building were there and it offered something that was more like Vice, and I know that we probably can't put a cannabis store there, not that I'm advocating that, but if somebody put a liquor store there, you might get more people coming to shop there. I'm not advocating for that, but you can lead the horse to water, and when they have a watering fountain, drinking fountain, or cell phone charging stations, the people that are going to live in that building are going to decide if they want to come out and walk on the street and go to the dog park, go to the coffee shop, just like the people in the curb decide whether they want to do that or not. This isn't really turning out to be the neighborhood perhaps that we had all envisioned. It's a huge building. And so hopefully the people that live there will want to venture out on foot and not in their car. And maybe people are coming across from the train. If the coffee shop is good, they'll walk over and get their lunch and sit down in the town square. But I mean, we can't, much as I do want there to be retail there, because I think that is what makes the community and the neighborhood, people getting out and walking to go, do their consumerism. So if you do add this other building, it should be occupied. So I don't know what we could do to entice somebody to occupy it, but a dead, no occupied building is worse than no building at all, in my opinion. It does make a neighborhood look dead, and that's very unappealing to people. So I don't know where that puts us, but we're trying to legislate what people do, or not legislate, but put in things that we want people to do. It's difficult.
Steve, I think a lot of us are feeling a lot of ambiguity about this second pavilion. And I'm hardly feeling a groundswell of support. So I'm going to suggest we take it out.
Why don't we do a motion on it and vote?
We can just do a hand raise. Why don't we do that? We don't need to formally act on it that way.
Right.
All right.
So taking it out, would this stall the project or would it move it along?
Neither. I think it's simply a decision we make. I don't think that they're going to decide not to go forward because they have to put in an additional building. So all those in favor of requiring that additional building, can you put your hands up?
Okay, so
I'm sorry, Lou, I didn't hear the word that you said.
yeah.
All in favor of what?
I'm sorry, Tammy. All those in favor of requiring the additional building.
Right.
Okay,
Thank you.
hands up, please. I see one hand raised. Those opposed? 1, 2, 3. And Chapin, was that a hand raise? Okay. And those who abstain? Okay, we've got 3 abstentions as well. All right, so let's take that off the table and move on.
What does that mean? Take it off the table.
It means that we're not requiring the additional building.
Is anyone interested in the proposal I made of having the pavilion be slightly enlarged, still be one building, but maybe lengthened in order to fill in more of that gap?
I mean,
I
then
would
you
be
could have
interested in seeing
one
like-
half be vacant, in other words, like half of it be filled with the coffee shop and the other half for somebody that comes along.
I mean, it could be a single tenant, right? Could be a coffee shop, but that didn't have indoor seating before, but has indoor seating now, right? Or more indoor space for
Right.
someone to sit and work.
I'd like some feedback from the staff. Steve?
Yeah, I don't know, but like if you added 25% onto the building, if that does much of anything, considering that distance versus the additional footage, 25 more feet of building, I don't, does it, if it was even that big, does that do much for you at this point? I don't know. I think there might be better. I think the idea of doing something like different at a node or two nodes along the that span, because you do have something else to keep in mind. You have the area where the dog park ends, and then you have the area where the pipeline right of way is before the next building even starts. So you could put 2 nodes, maybe it's 2 nodes of activity in that area to break it up. I think that might be a more sound approach than the building addition.
Yeah, plus it's design wise, I mean, we'd be back to square one if the whole building has to be redesigned.
Right. Okay. How do people feel about just changing an additional node to 2 nodes?
Works for me.
Yeah, I'm good with 2 nodes.
Do we want to suggest what they are, like a pickleball court, a bocce court, something?
Oh, no, it's not. They're not. The nodes aren't going to be nearly that large.
Okay.
It's like seating areas or interests of that, like a sculpture or something like that is generally, I think, what the nodes are.
Well,
We did it like this.
Steve, do the nodes
Yeah.
need to be discussed with staff?
We could put that in if you wanted.
Why don't we put that in so that the staff has some input into what goes there?
And if they don't, if there's a dispute between that, they could always come back and review it with you guys and we can argue about nodes of activity.
Okay. Okay, well, the really big one is number 3, that all utilities be buried underground. I asked my question about the savings and going from 2 buildings to 1 building because it's, and again, I'm not an engineer, I'm not an architect, but my guess is that in making that move, that financially, the savings are substantial. So I'm a little bit less concerned about having those utilities buried underground. I know the threat about it killing the project, but I think we need to do what we think is best for the project, best for the neighborhood, best for the city. And I think that having the utilities underground responds to all 3 of those.
I think it also, just a couple editorial points, I think it also adds to resilience too. If the utilities are buried underground, they're more likely not to be damaged in a storm or have to get replaced in a storm, ensuring power for the area. I mean, I don't know about, I wasn't involved with those conversations many years ago. I'm sure I think there are 2 different versions of what occurred, and so I wasn't there. I can't attest to that. On hindsight, it would have been great if we addressed that up front. Bob and I are in agreement on that at the beginning of the master plan. But I think, from your perspective, I'm thinking in your perspective, we've given a lot with this. We've given, they can do 15 stories throughout the development or 12 stories throughout the development. We've upped the density. We've changed the zoning language. We changed the zoning map. We've already, looks like you're approving a change to the master plan before it even gets started. So I think you guys have demonstrated a willingness to bend to requests. I think, there should be a give and trade in this conversation.
I agree as well. I feel that an investment upfront is savings on liability in the back.
I concur.
I do too.
Are you ready for a motion to approve?
Did you want,
Mr. Chairman, point of order?
Yeah,
The applications are hereby withdrawn. There's no need to take any further action. Thank you.
That's what I was worried about.
okay,
What? He just withdrew the whole application?
right.
If we required underground utilities, they're not going to go forward.
We have to be confident in the worthiness of investment in our city as well.
All right. Let's
A
move.
minute break?
Do you want to take it now? I was going to schedule it for 9, but we can do it now if
That's okay.
It's 8:10.
But wait, we didn't, time out.
Yeah, go ahead.
We didn't vote either way.
It's irrelevant.
was
He
just-
pulled the project.
But he doesn't know what we would have voted
We
for.
don't know what we would have voted. We have no,
He was not, I feel like in the written response to the latest round of feedback, there were so many things that was just like, we hear you, we decline to do that, we decline to do that. I feel like there was already 2 feet out the door.
I don't know about,
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that
I don't know
either.
if I agree with that.
That was a
Like,
really long and articulated response
yeah, I thought there
to
was,
those were philosophical differences, as the
right, which is what
Waters
we
pointed out.
want to understand here. Like, the thing you want to be also careful of is losing the activation of the entire area off of this.
Yeah, exactly.
Over utility lines, which we did not
Look,
vote.
there is a reason he just pulled his application. It's to give us an opportunity to vote so that the utility lines don't go underground. I don't like being, frankly, I am willing to vote in favor of having the utility lines underground. And number one, because for the three reasons that I gave before. I don't particularly appreciate being the attempt to manipulate us in this way. And I think that's what it is.
I would hate to see this project go away. And I frankly, the utility lines being underground in a very small area when they're not underground elsewhere has less dramatic appeal to me than.
This is not a small area. This is the entire project area.
Oh,
And-
Yeah,
and it was pulled
from one end to the other.
the vote.
Take a look at the street view or drive down there. The utility, you can see the utility lines right along where their project would be, and it would look hideous.
Steve, what's your concept of the differences of opinion on this in terms of the utilities being where they are now? I guess I'm a little bit sensitive to it because I got, obviously on a much smaller scale, but I got caught in this same situation myself where I spent a ton of money to find out that the gas lines went in 2 weeks later and didn't tell anybody. But I kind of sensitive to, having that entire project dug up and the utilities overhead and not going in the ground then, but now being suggested after it's all paved and sidewalk that they go underground. So I'm just wondering, what were the two stories that you heard?
I was told in different conversations that it was always incumbent on them to do that. They have a different version of it, but again, I wasn't in on those conversations, so I don't know what's factual and what's not. So,
My experience with utility companies is you can ask them and then they guide every step of the way and charge you every step of the way. So it's hard for me to believe that.
yeah, the utility, I did speak with Eversource, and Eversource said they can underground it. They just said they're just not paying for it. So it was just who's going to pay for it. So I think the Attorney Waters had said that they're just not going to pay for it. I think something else to keep in mind, while they withdrew this particular site plan application, the master plan is still approved as the prior version, still in effect. So, if they decided, if and when they're ready to come back, they'll come back with a new application.
Is it the case that we have
That's
no action to take
unfortunate,
on?
6 hours later.
One
6
person at a
hours,
time.
10 hours, 30 hours.
Is it the case we don't have action to take on either application at this point?
Correct. Yeah, they withdrew, so there's really nothing you can vote on at this juncture.
Okay.
Steve, what do you think the likelihood that a different company would propose something within the context of the currently approved master plan?
Sorry, Ann, I can't hear you.
What do you think is the likelihood that a different company would apply to build something in the lines of the current master plan? Or is it like BLT is the only
BLT owns it
type
all.
of person? I know they own it all, but
They'd have
if
to
they sold
sell-
it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Nick. It's their property, so they could sell the rights to the project basically, and someone could build what was proposed, or that somebody could come in and seek to modify the master plan and start with a different project.
Yeah, it's just a shame given where we are with all of this and all the work that's gone into it. And we're talking about taxes going up and needing for stuff like this. Like, I don't know. I guess we don't have anything to talk on, but not how, I don't know.
All right,
Steve,
shall we
could you-
take our break?
Yep. Could I just ask Steve a question pertaining to utilities, Lou?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. Steve, other large projects in the city, are there utilities buried, like West Avenue, the one that's going in where the Y is that going to be buried? Could you give us
Yeah.
some examples of ones that are and ones that are not, so then we could go?
Sure, yeah, I'd have to go back and Brian might remember on the Pinnacle, but the West Ave project at the YMCA that you just approved, you put that in as a requirement of approval, and they reluctantly agreed to do it. And that one I don't, I don't know what the cost is from A to B for the two projects, but that one was pretty tricky, having been on site and speaking with Eversource about what they had to do to bury it, because there were lines that were across the street on two different sides of the street that were feeding two different buildings that they had to take down and put in a new pole or put in underground. So those folks weren't happy to do it, but that was a condition of approval that the commission put on. Because if you recall on that one, that I think it's Maple Street facade was going to be walk-up townhouses. And, where the idea was we didn't want you walking out and looking at a utility pole. You wanted to look at a nice facade. So that was kind of the impetus for that change.
It would seem to me that the cost would be de minimis compared to the cost of the whole project. So I'm wondering if there's something else going on there that we're not noticing.
I think it's cost, and then you can draw your own conclusions from there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and we really don't understand clearly, or at least I don't understand clearly what the costs really are. That's the problem. People say it costs too much, and then people say, oh, no, it doesn't cost too much, and we have no idea what it costs.
I think residential burying electric lines from a pole to a house is around $20,000. So go from there.
Let me suggest that, in fairness to other people who are waiting to make presentations, that we take our break. Steve, is there any reason, if we wish to, that we can't continue this conversation after we've completed the rest of our business?
I don't see why you're just talking. There was an item on the agenda. You're just talking about an item on the agenda that was withdrawn. You're not making any decisions or anything.
And that's fine. It's 8:19. Let's get back together at 8:35, and we'll go on with our second public hearing, Harbor Ventures. You continue our meeting. The next public hearing is 2024-08 SP/CAM Harbor Ventures LLC, 18 Harbor Avenue, District 1, Block 25, Lot 7. Construction of new building for contractor storage yard use. Again, in case anyone who wants to comment was not at the previous public hearing, let me explain how we organize these hearings. The developer will, or representative will present the project, during which the commission members are free to ask any questions they have. Following that, when the presentation has been completed, we will open the meeting up to the public for public comment. A staff member will explain how you can access the public hearing to comment. We ask that you give us your name and your address if you're going to comment. Keeping your comments as brief as possible, but also making certain that you ask any questions and make any comments that are important to you, because you only have one opportunity to comment. After everyone who wishes to speak has had an opportunity, we will close the public portion of the hearing and turn it back to the developer or their representative for response to what comments we've heard. And again, during that period, commission members are free to ask any questions they have. Following that, we close the hearing and we'll move on to action. And with that, I will turn it over, I believe, to Attorney Suchi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. For the record, my name is Liz Suchi. I'm a partner at Carmody Torrance, Sandeck, and Hennessy, 1055 Washington Boulevard in Stamford. Present this evening is Rob Fahey. He's the owner of Harbor Ventures LLC, which is the property owner, and Plumbing Works, which is his company that he operates out of this location under approved permits for contractor's yard. Rick Tomasetti, principal at Tomasetti Architects, is on the call with us. He is the project architect, along with Peter Romano, a civil engineer, principal at Land Tech, who provided the civil engineering drawings, drainage report, and environmental impact statement. Application for a special permit and CAM was submitted to the commission on February 12th under the old zoning regulations. The property at the time was designated as industrial 1, so we're proceeding under the old industrial number 1 regulations. Neighbors were notified of the submission of the application on February 12th by certificate of mailing, and that certificate of mailing was returned to the staff. Neighbors were notified of tonight's public hearing by certified mail return receipt requested, along with regular mail on March 7th. And in response to that, I've received 1 inquiry from a representative of Yankee Gas. That was last Friday. I returned the call, left a message, but did not hear further from that representative. So hopefully that representative has the questions that she had answered either by the documents that were online or what the message that I left her. The applicant before you is Harbor Ventures LLC as owner, and Plumbing Works LLC at the location 18 Harbor Avenue, District 1, Block 25, Lot 7. The lot size is 14,311 square feet, or just over 0.32 of an acre. It is bounded by Harbor Avenue to the east, Yankee Gas's contractor's yard to the north, Unitech, which is an industrial equipment supplier, to the south, and residentially zoned and developed properties to the west beyond our client's site rear garage. At this point, may I ask Mr. Romano to screen share some of the photos and plans to give you an understanding of where this is in case you have not had the opportunity to drive by. As I mentioned before, the property is industrial number 1. It is within the coastal area management zone. The Norwalk Harbor is located down gradient to the east of the site beyond Harbor Avenue, and it is separated from curbs, sidewalks, streets, and other developed properties along with the Metro North branch of the Danbury branch of the Metro North Railroad further to the east along the west bank of the Norwalk River. The proposal, as was stated, is to demolish the, existing conditions. There is a 3-family non-conforming dwelling circa late 1800s, site in front of the site, which has been modified substantially over the years. There is also a site rear contractor's garage at the western end of the property that is generally right up against the rear property line and is being circled right now by Mr. Romano. There's a fence generally in the midsection of the property to separate out most of the vehicles that use the site from the front portion of the property that was residential. There in 2013, prior owner, the Spagnolo family, secured permit for a contractor's yard, and that permit remains in effect. The plan in front of you is the existing conditions plan with the 3-family house in the front. And in the rear is the 1-story 3-bay garage. To the rear, to the west is our residential properties, multifamily that are on that front on Merwin Street. And as I said before, to the south is, to the north is Yankee Gas and their contractor's yard and bins for storage of materials. And to the south is the Unitech facility. The Unitech structure is almost on the property line, and in front of their structure, fronting on Harbor Avenue, is their parking field. So the proposal, as was mentioned, is to demolish the existing 3-story house and construct a new 41 by 100 square foot building that meets all the industrial 1 zone regulation requirements. We secure all approvals to continue to operate the entire site as a contractor's yard for Mr. Fahey's plumbing business. Most of the materials will be stored indoors, and that includes piping and tanks, PVC, copper, and other materials used in his plumbing business. The applicant's fleet is approximately 8 to 10 vehicles, including some small vans, an excavator, and some other trucks that are proposed to be parked in front of the structure but behind the front setback. And that's shown on the plan in front of you. You'll see the proposed new building, 41 by 100, is to the rear. And then in front, and way in the back, is the existing 1-story 3-bay structure, which will remain. And in front of the proposed 41 by 100 square foot building will be the parking field for my client's fleet of vehicles. And those are all behind the front setback. A planted buffer is proposed along the western property line behind the existing garage to kind of screen that a little bit more from the residential properties to the rear. I believe to the south where it says Tuthill Finance, I believe that is a motor vehicle repair facility. I'm not 100% certain, but we are proposing some landscaping around that southern and western property line. There does exist a stand of trees on, as you can see here, that are planted on the Yankee Gas property, and we don't think it's necessary to plant additional trees there on our side since those exist and since any plantings would just be blocking us from an existing contractor's yard on the north. There's very little room on the south side of our property to install any landscaping other than what we've proposed, and any landscaping to the middle of the lot or the portion of the lot that bisects with Harbor Avenue would just be to screen an existing building and an on-grade parking lot. Mr. Fahey currently has 4 full-time employees and himself. He does plan to expand his staff over time. He also operates an apprentice program, and right now he's got 1 apprentice working for him learning the plumbing industry. His employees are Norwalk residents. There would be no change in hours of operation. That's from the permit as previously issued, Monday through Friday, basically 6 to 5 p.m. But he's also open on weekends for emergency off-hour scheduled work. We propose a new upgraded on-site stormwater system to treat and intercept the small increase in runoff from the new building, the paved drive, and the parking area. That's a very brief overview for you. So at this point, I'd like to have Mr. Romano walk you through the site plan, and he'll be followed by Mr. Tomasetti, who can provide you with the information on the proposed structure. And we're happy to answer any questions that you may have at any time. Peter? Peter, you're muted.
I'm sorry, rookie move. Pete Romano, principal with Land Tech, and I said, which I thought was a real funny line, in addition to being Liz Such, he's Vanna White, and we're also the site civil engineers on the project. And to Mr. Schulman's point, I will be brief. It's pretty straightforward. You know, all of our stuff is buried. Not the fun stuff that Rick's going to talk about, but essentially there's some impactful stuff from what we're doing. This piece of property is completely impervious right now, no storm drainage at all. So we're introducing storm drainage for the 100-year storm. We've got we have galleries in the front yard, going to pick up the roof leaders, pick up all the impervious pavement in the front, which doesn't happen right now. So it does 2 things. It doesn't increase the runoff off of our property, also promotes water quality for the storm drainage in the area. We have 8 parking spaces, which are broken up according to what's the use inside. There's part warehouse, part office space, and that they're accommodated. You know how they have 4 employees. You got warehouse at 5,000 per parking space. And then we put a little planting along here. There's not much more that we put together other than putting all the things together that people have asked us for through the different commissions, different agencies. And so we got some comments back from the Public Works Director from Wilbur, who's one of the engineers at Public Works. Got some minor comments, all things that are addressable before we go in and actually pull our zoning permit. Couple very minor comments from traffic, you know, a little thing about, you know, increasing the radius where we pull into the driveway, and then eliminate, you know, one of those ripple pads that they put on the handicap ramp. He's suggesting we don't need it in this particular situation. So all those things and whatever conditions you folks impose upon us will all be addressed and included in our plans when we eventually go and get our zoning permit. So, and obviously that might be, if anybody picked up on this, there's a dumpster in front, and then there's a dumpster in the back. Dumpster in the back will have the carts like a lot of us have at home. They're going to be able to wheel it around to the front. No need for a garbage truck to get back there. This one here in front will be something that garbage truck can drive up to, whether it'll be a hook from the back or a scoop from the front. That'll be where the bulk of the refuse is going to be collected. really, that's, well, I don't want to make light of our work, but I mean, that's generally what we put together, and certainly answer any questions the commissioners have. Thank you.
I had a quick question. I'm not sure if this may be for Attorney Sachi, but is there any materials being stored outside, or is everything 100% in the building? I couldn't quite tell from the comments at the start.
But Liz, I don't know if you want to answer, I mean, that has not been brought up, that we're gonna be storing stuff outside. I mean, there might be something when things get delivered, they stated before they get brought into the building. But our
That's fine. I mean more long-term sort of
Yeah, no,
stuff.
No, especially in light of some of the materials and some of that he uses in the trade, they're very valuable. And
Right,
they're
you don't need
managed
copper
to
pipes
keep-
lying out front.
Exactly. And to keep the site neat, to keep it clean and presentable, and that's one of the major reasons for this structure, materials be inside.
Yeah, that's the other side of the coin here that I appreciate.
Are there any volatile gases that are used in plumbing stored in the building?
I don't think so. Rob Fahey is on the call. Rob, any volatile gases, Rob?
So we don't have any volatile gases, no. There's PVC primers that are small cans that are stored, but that's probably about it. There's cylinders, but those for acetylene,
Right.
those are generally stored on the trucks, not in the facility. But we could store those whatever safe manner they need to be at, or a location outside in the back is where we store them now.
Thank you.
But, Rob, just to answer and go a little bit further with Mr. Truman, you can store them in the building as long as they're properly secured in an area that's secure from bumping into them, whether it be an enclosed area or bollards. People have it all the time. In garages, in auto body shops, typically there's stuff inside, but there's procedure to follow in order to store them inside. So like you may have it on a truck and you pull in there, that's a secure thing. Nobody can back into it. Nobody can tip it. I'm sure Rob's got an anchor on the trucks so they don't bounce around. But you can store acetylene inside a building.
If no one else, I'm sorry, excuse me.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Ms. Sachi.
No, go ask your question. I was just wondering if anyone had any other questions. We could then go on to architecture, but please ask your question.
Thanks. Yeah, so Mr. Romano, you had mentioned the two dumpsters, one of them to be wheeled up front. Is it possible for both of them to be located in the back and wheeled up front as needed, or what's the reason for?
I think it ends up taking up parking space. And that'll be stuff that'll come out of the other barn and out the back of that building is 100 feet long. So I think that's a place to keep it enclosed, and it'll, like I said, we're planning on it being the type of carts that we all have in our houses, right? When the garbage man comes and picks those things up on the wheel. So the answer to your quick response is put it in front, diminishes our parking spaces.
Could they both be located in the back?
Then you go get to the big one. One of them is going to have to be picked up by a garbage truck, right?
Gotcha.
There's gonna be stuff that, I'm sure he's not, well, they don't probably even use copper anymore, right, Rob? So there'll be stuff that'll have to be picked up by the typical garbage.
Packing materials, there's packing materials that you have, cardboard, things of that nature, recycle, there'll be a cardboard dumpster. So you're not gonna have that stored in the back.
It just seems convenient to have that, that'll be guys working in the warehouse, go out and dump something in the garbage and then gets brought around on the days that garbage gets picked up. I mean, they could even, right, Rob, they can even walk it through the garage if they needed to.
Well, yeah, the back location was proposed to be storage of either in that enclosure area, a water heater that might not have an area inside that needs to go to a scrapyard. And then the front area would be dumpsters that are day-to-day garbage that gets picked up. Right now, we have a large dumpster on site that gets picked up by a garbage truck. So it's not just, we don't put the stress on the city to take the garbage. We pay for our own garbage.
Thank you for that clarification.
If anyone has any other questions for Mr. Romano? If not, Mr. Tomasetti, would you mind coming on and describing what you've prepared for this project?
Okay, can everybody see my screen and hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Rick Tomasetti. I'm a principal with Tomasetti Architects, 27 Cricket Lane, Wilton, Connecticut. I am the principal in charge of this project. Very straightforward building. This is a metal industrial building, steel skin, steel superstructure. To the left here where my cursor is, moving around, that faces Harbor Avenue. And what happens is there's a garage door here to allow vehicles to enter in, and then there's a garage door on the other side, which allows those things getting from the back barn to get back in to the shop. Effectively, we have pipe storage racks along one wall, and then we have supplies and pipe storage rack down here where my cursor is. There's a washdown bay for the trucks, and that gets put into a system that is into one of Peter's water quality, and it's filtered and all that good stuff. And then really it's some restrooms. There's a laundry for Rob's staff when they come back if they're dirty. Plumbing is not always a clean endeavor. And they've got a wash area, and then mechanical room, a kitchenette, break room, and an office up front. And then there is a set of stairs that get us up to what is a mezzanine level. So you come up a set of stairs. There's kind of an open shop storage area around the mezzanine here that overlooks to below. And then there's 4 office spaces. One might be a conference area, a meeting room, but 4 office spaces for Rob's staff, bookkeeping and the like. And there's also midway up on the stairs, there's a landing to get into a mechanical loft. So all the mechanical equipment for this building will be internal. So we're not worried, it's a tight site. We don't want to worry about screening mechanical equipment and putting it on the roof and all that. It's all internal here. And the entire first floor is radiant heat, so we have that benefit as well. And I think Rob is planning on making this geothermal, but I'll let Rob answer that. Any questions?
You have
Just show the exteriors. I'm sorry.
yeah,
excuse
the
me.
architectural.
Sure. Yeah, it's it's your classic metal building. We get a couple of windows across the mezzanine level, a garage door, an awning. We have a placeholder above the awning for a sign. There's a light inside the awning, and then going down the alleyway, there's a people door with a window into the kitchenette space and a light for safety purposes. And then the back of the building is similar with a double door to get out to the backyard, safety light, and then a double overhead door bay. We actually had this building not quite as tall initially, but your regulations call for a 20-foot clear first floor space. So we revised that per staff comments, and we elevated the building so that we can get the requisite space we need on the first and second floor.
Questions? Okay, if not, let's move on.
You're muted, Liz, sorry.
I'm sorry, I apologize. The only other thing that we would want to bring to your attention is we requested that there be a waiver of the traffic studies. It is an existing permitted contractor's use. It's just a new building to house all of Rob's operations. We have nothing further at this point to add. We're happy to answer any other questions or see if the public has any questions. Barring any opposition, I'd like just half a minute to summarize at the end, and that's about it. We have submitted an environmental impact statement, and our moving papers have responses to all of the standards of review, both special permit and coastal area management, and the additional standards for the industrial #1 zone.
Okay, I'd just like to see if staff has any comments. Amelia?
Yes, so the applicant did respond to some initial staff concerns, including increasing that first floor by a foot to comply with the height standards. We and staff also supports the waiver of the traffic study. We don't think that's necessary. And we had also inquired about moving the parking area to the back of the building, but do understand that due to the shape of the lot and how narrow it is, that wouldn't entirely be feasible. One concern I had brought up was, and I know there are construction details for the dumpster enclosures, but perhaps like design details or drawings just to see what those enclosures would look like, especially because the one in the front would be fairly close to the road and probably visible from the street. There is required screening, vegetated screening at street level, I believe, but and it's not something necessarily the commission has, I think, any jurisdiction over what the dumpster enclosures look like, but it was something I was curious about what would be seen from the street. And probably the biggest issue from my perspective is the landscaping. As the plans are submitted now, they do not comply with the Industrial 1 regulations. The Industrial 1 zone requires that the area within required yards, except for the parking and access ways, be landscaped with lawns, native trees, and shrubs, which arguably they meet the minimum, but there shall be a minimum of 10-foot buffer of vegetated screening between this type of use when they abut a residential zone, and there is D-resident zone to the back, and there is a small buffer in the rear where it abuts the residence zone, but it is not the minimum required 10 feet. So I would argue that it doesn't comply, but there is a condition in the draft resolution that would require the applicant to submit a landscaping plan done by a professional that would meet those standards.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
I had a question for Amelia. Are we able to condition that this as a contractor site, the way that they're using it today, or that they're proposing it, makes a lot of sense. It's all inside, it's all contained, fantastic. I'd hate for us to give the approval and then all of a sudden it can convert into the, holding gravel outside or things that, generally we've not wanted people to expand uses on. So can we add, are we able to add conditions of the approval to ensure that it stays what it is, or what we're, you understand what I'm saying, I think.
That was one of the, when the memo was originally sent out to, I hadn't received the applicant response yet. And one of the things they confirmed with that was that there would be no outdoor storage of materials. So there was a couple bullet points I had in my staff comment section of my memo that I just moved to conditions, which
okay, great.
I can, but one of them was, yeah, that there be no outdoor storage material, that while it's technically allowed right now, we did add that as a condition because it's not what they're proposing. We, like you said, kind of want them to stick with what they're proposing and continue that approved use.
Thank you.
And from a coastal site plan perspective, I forgot to even talk about that. From a coastal site plan review perspective, I think this application is fine and consistent with the Connecticut Coastal Management Act. It's right on the edge of the CAM boundary. It's not in a flood zone. And I don't see, it's not, abutting any coastal resources. So I don't see any adverse impacts from a coastal site plan review standpoint.
Well, I had a quick question for Amelia.
Sure.
When I was looking at the site plan and the presentation, I wondered myself, because of the non-conforming use that's staying, how the buffer zone was going to work. Is there any thought given to maybe utilization of a stockade fence instead of plantings? Just because it's such a tight area back there. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, there is. So I think it's just required screening. There are some areas where it's required to be vegetated screening, like in the rear where it abuts the resident zone. And it might also be, I think it's just screened from view from the street. So that technically might not need to be vegetation, but along that south end where it's, asphalt on either side, I think a fence would be appropriate there. I had mentioned that previously when this property received a commission approval, they had the commission, I think, had suggested a 5-foot vegetated buffer around the contractor's yard use, but because it was only in the rear of the property, they only screened that area. So I'd suggested they screen the whole property because it is now all that use, but I do understand that there would be some constraints in areas like that where it's just not really feasible to put planting. So a fence, I think, would be adequate screening in those areas.
Thank you.
Okay.
There is right now, excuse me, Mr. Schulman, pardon me for interrupting.
That's
There
okay.
is a fence on the Uditech property, a chain link fence that has mesh or a similar kind of somewhat opaque fabric that's
I
there.
was talking about the back of the property,
You mean all the way in the back next to the garage?
behind the garage.
Understood. I think that's a good idea.
That would need to be, that's required to have the vegetated buffer per the.
I know that's what it says, but it's just such a small area there. I just wondered if a fence could be there in lieu of that. If it can't, it can't. I just wondered that, that's all.
Okay, in that area, I think that might need a variance because it is pretty clearly written out in the regulations, just specifically in the area that abuts the residence zone.
And we do have plantings shown there. Perhaps we.
Oh, I know you do. It just looked like a little tough.
Yeah.
To accomplish what the goal was, that's all. Anyway.
Amelia, if I may, I would strongly advocate for keeping as much vegetative buffer on any sides of the property as possible, because there are residential properties on, I think it's Academy Street, and even though the property to the south is a industrial type business, we need more green in our city. We're trying to make our city more green. So maybe it's tar to tar from one lot to the next, I'm not sure, but I would advocate as much natural screening as possible.
Okay. Anything else? If not, Liz, back to you.
I don't know if you've heard from the public yet.
No, we have not. Okay, then you are finished for now.
For now, yes, thank you.
Okay, then we will open it up to public comment. Brian, you want to explain how people can access this?
Sure. So for anyone from the public, if you'd like to speak, you can use the raise your hand tool. It's at the bottom of your screen. You click that once. Doesn't appear so, Mr. Schulman.
All right, do you want to announce it just one more time? Then we can close it.
Sure. So for anyone from the public, if you'd like to speak, you use the raise your hand tool. It's at the bottom of your screen. You just click that once.
Still no one?
Still no one.
Okay, I'll turn it back to you, Attorney Secchi.
Thank you, Mr. Schulman. Since the hour is late, I'm not going to go through all of the standards of review for special permit. They're in the application. We believe we comply with all of the standards set forth in 118-1450 and also in section 118-700B5, which are the additional standards for the industrial number 1 zone. We believe we comply with environmental impact, and we've provided the environmental impact statement. The property is going to be, it has sanitary facilities, illumination and noise. We have all of the fixtures for illumination are downlit, full cutoff fixtures, and they're sufficient enough to provide safety for employees and visitors and should not have any impact on the adjacent streets or properties. With that in mind, we have nothing further to add unless you have additional comments from Mr. Tomasetti or Mr. Romano or Mr. Fahey. We hope that you can close the hearing tonight and act this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any final questions before we close the hearing? Okay, if not, we will close the hearing and go on to action. Can we put up the resolution on this?
So the first few conditions are the standard conditions, developing in accordance with the submitted plans and the approved plans, filing the special permit and Mylar on the land records. And the highlighted is just revisions from the first time that we sent the staff memo. We did receive comments from WPCA and TMP yesterday, so that's been added. And also now we've added a surety for sedimentation and erosion controls. And then this is what Commissioner Cantor, when I was responding to his question. The first two, I believe, are requirements in the regulations, but just added them into the conditions. And then there was confirmation there'd be no material storage, so I added that as a condition as well.
Thank you.
And then, so the only condition I think that we should take a look at is the condition number 15 right now, which I do have it as a more intense landscaping use, which would require a 5-foot vegetated buffer around all property lines, though that may not be feasible. So this is something I think the commission might want to talk about potentially. We're leaving it up to staff approval, but with, how much leeway, do we want to require a 5-foot buffer all the way around, or does it make sense to look at the site and then determine where that is or is not possible?
Well, I think that if fencing makes more sense on one of the sides abutting the other industrial uses, the staff ought to have the flexibility to offer that as an alternative.
I agree.
So maybe I'll change it to, shall depict a 5-foot vegetated buffer where feasible along the property lines, except where it is required where it abuts the residential zone.
Okay.
Yeah, but Mr. Shulman,
Yes.
if I may, right now we're kind of depending on Yankee Gas for the vegetated buffer on one side. What happens if they decide to cut down all their trees? And in the aerial photo that I'm looking at, it does look like there's a little bit of greenery on the south edge of the property. And I mean, good fences make good neighbors, but good greenery is good for everybody, So I don't think we should lessen that. I understand that the building, wants to be as big as it can, but I don't think we should lower the standard there.
I concur, Tammy.
Same.
But the difficulty, I believe, is with the present landscaping on the Yankee Gas property, there's nothing going to grow under that. They might be able to plant it if Yankee Gas cut all their trees down.
Well,
okay, but we can only speak to this property right now, right? You're right. We
Right,
can't.
exactly. That's the point.
What
Yeah.
if they do?
Amelia
We-
has highlighted the language that says where feasible. So that if, as Richard says, nothing will grow in a given area, you still want to have a visual buffer between the adjacent properties, and fencing might well serve as that buffer if nothing's going to grow there. I think we ought to leave the staff the flexibility to do that. Otherwise, we may be requiring the property owner to be refreshing a lawn or bushes that simply won't grow.
I don't know what to say to that.
Well, Tammy, doesn't where feasible give you, like in the future, if Yankee, whatever, gas line removes their stuff, it then becomes more feasible. So then something could be put in there, right? Is that the notion that you're saying, Lou?
No, I'm not sure that we can then go back and insist on something when we've already allowed something else.
Right, it would just apply when the property is renovated and then they get their CO. Then after that, they don't have to do anything.
Right.
I like the where feasible is it allows it to address the portions of the property where it is feasible. Yeah, agreeing with Richard's earlier point about where it may not be able to grow.
Amelia, can you take us to the bottom of this? so we can.
Or,
see
I
anything
think
else?
20 is the last.
Oh, okay, okay. All right, I'm
Really sorry.
gonna,
We shifted a little bit to the center. I don't know, on my screen, I'm only seeing half of each.
To your
item.
left or right? Oh, it's not. even-
To my left. I think if you reduced it in
Do you
size,
have
then
it,
maybe
do you
we
have
could
it
see
zoomed
better.
in, Tammy? Do you have it zoomed in by accident?
Maybe
it's-
yours.
Maybe I do too. Yep.
It's coming in
there, thank
perfect
you.
for us.
Yep. Sorry. Thank you. Good
okay,
catch, Nick.
Feel free to zoom in now.
right,
Thank you. I had it zoomed in for something before.
okay.
Motion to approve?
Is that Nick?
Yep.
Okay, Nick has made a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And Richard has seconded. I think we can do this one with a show of hands. All those in favor of approving the resolution? Are there any opposed? Tammy, I couldn't tell. Were you opposed? or-
I went along with it.
Okay.
Think green though.
Okay. Go ahead, Darius. You abstain?
Yes.
Okay. And Darius abstain. So the motion passes. Thank you, Attorney Suchi.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, we'll now move on to the third and final public hearing. Action on 2024-08 SP/CAM. That's oh, I'm sorry. My mistake. I was referring to Harbor Ventures. It's 2024-13 SUB, Norden Center LLC, Fortis Property Group LLC, 10 Norden Place, District 3, Block 7, Lot 40, proposed 3-lot subdivision. As you probably noticed in the material that was sent out by Steve, the regulations on the subdivision are very clear and very restricted. We're acting in our capacity here really as the planning commission, not the zoning commission. If they meet the requirements, we have no choice but to approve. Now, I know that the proposed project that at some point will follow this is quite controversial. We will make sure that we hold a public hearing, although we're not required to by law, but we will make sure that we hold a public hearing on that matter. We did receive, and I hope everyone's had a chance to look at that one letter that we received regarding the action we're taking tonight. That letter, while I assume well-meaning, was not appropriate because all we're doing tonight is approving a subdivision. And so whatever follows the subdivision with regard to the action we take tonight is irrelevant. A property owner has a right, if they meet the requirements, to subdivide their property. We can't second guess that if they meet the requirements. The place for comment about the project itself belongs in the public hearing that we'll have. And even then, unfortunately, that will only be a site review. That is not a special permit. Nonetheless, and although we're not required to hold a public hearing for a site review, we think that there's enough interest in that matter to hold a public hearing on it. So with that, I think I'll again turn to Attorney Suchi to discuss the 3-lot subdivision.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, for the record, Liz Suchy of Carmody, Torrance, Sandak, and Hennessy, 1055 Washington Boulevard in Stamford. I represent the owner of the property, Norwalk Center LLC. Present in tonight's meeting as well is Akiva Cobre, a representative of the owner applicant. And as I said, the owner is Norwalk Center LLC. The application for subdivision was filed February 1st under the old zoning map and zoning regulations, which classified the property as industrial number 2. Neighbors were notified of the public hearing on March 4th by certified mail return receipt requested, as well as regular mail. And a packet with the green cards, domestic return receipt cards, was delivered to staff today, and it also included copies of letters that may have been returned as undeliverable, and I believe also copies of letters that have not either been returned or the green cards received. And that should be part of your permanent file. The property is 10 Norden Place in East Norwalk, Block 3, District 3, Block 17, Lot 40. And as I said before, at the time of the filing, the property was zoned industrial number 2. It's bordered by Norden Place to the west, by Metro North Railroad to the south. To the east, there is a multifamily development, Avalon, and there is another, to the north, there is the access way from Norden Place to that multifamily development. As Mr. Schulman indicated, the only application before you tonight is a 3-lot subdivision. Existing right now, the property is 37 acres. There is more than 100,000 parking spaces. The main building is about 635,000 square feet, formerly occupied by Northrop Grumman. There is a 167,000 multi-story data recovery center and a 9,000 square foot test building on the southeastern corner of the property. The proposal for a 3-lot subdivision is as follows. 1 lot, it would be subdivided off. That's a 3-acre lot, and eventually that would be used by Corville Nurseries, which had to leave its location in South Norwalk to make way for the new South Norwalk Elementary School. There is a 1-acre lot along the railroad track that is going to be used, continue to be used by Metro North for its purposes. And then the remainder of the property, some 33 acres, would continue to have the structure in the middle, parking fields to the left, parking fields to the right. All of the lots conform to the industrial number 2 zone. They meet the minimum width, the minimum area. There is a pocket of wetlands on the southeast corner of the property, along with a intermittent watercourse. And in connection with your subdivision application, the statutes and regulations require that we submit an application to inland wetland. That application was heard and decided last week, and there should be a copy of that resolution and permit in your file. There are a few staff issues that emerged. One had to do with fire hydrants. There are 2 fire hydrants at the entrance to the property, the northernmost entrance off Norden Place. There are 4 fire hydrants around the building, and then there are 4 more fire hydrants in the vicinity of the test building. Plus, the fire department, City of Norwalk, has the fire marshal's office reviewed the plan and sent its approval. There does exist a sidewalk along the entire frontage of Norden Place from the entrance, beyond the entrance, all the way down past the secondary entrance and the tertiary entrance, all the way to just about Woodside Avenue. Lastly, there are shade trees along Norden Place in various locations. There is an elevated berm generally in the middle of the Norden Place frontage where there is, it's more open, but it is an elevated berm. And we would ask that if street trees are required, that they only be required to be planted in that very limited area and perhaps be tied to the future site plan application that you will see in a few weeks. To date, I believe the sign-offs that should be in the file are Department of Public Works, Fire Department, the First District Water Department, and I don't believe we've received specific comments from Transportation, Mobility, and Parking as yet. And we may just have received comments from the Water Pollution Control Authority, but all of those agencies received copies of the subdivision application on or about February 1st. As Mr. Schulman indicated, when you approve or disapprove a subdivision plan, you act in an administrative capacity and you're controlled by the regulations for subdivision. Furthermore, you are limited to determining whether or not the subdivision application complies with the regulations. And that means, do each of the lots comply with lot frontage and lot area? And as we said before, each of the lots either meets or well exceeds the minimum required for the industrial number 2 zone. Specifically, each lot has more than 50 feet of frontage and each lot far exceeds 5,000 square feet of area. that concludes presentations for you. It's rather straightforward, 3-lot subdivision, all lots are compliant. And we would hope that you would be able to move this matter to hearing and conclude the hearing, close the hearing, and then act this evening. That's what it was about.
Thank you. I should have explained before Attorney Suchi began, but I can now, that the way in which we conduct these hearings is the representative of the property owner makes the presentation. We can ask questions during that presentation. When that presentation is completed, we open it up, as we will in just a moment, to the public for public comments. We ask again that your comments be as brief as possible while addressing any questions you have about the subdivision. Remembering that we're kind of P or PG rated in terms of your comments. You have only one opportunity to comment. So we suggest that you ask any questions that are important to you. But again, I want to remind you that the only comments that are acceptable at this point are comments on the subdivision itself, not on the project that will follow at some point after the subdivision. And with that, I'll ask Brian to explain how people can get their comments into the record.
Sure. So for anyone from the public who'd like to speak regarding this application, you could use the raise your hand tool. It's at the bottom of your screen. You click that once. And if you're dialed in on a phone, you would hit *9. Again, that's the raise your hand tool. It's at the bottom of your screen, or *9.
Brian's starting to sound like a stewardess there with that.
Well, I'm sure the 4 folks on the call have heard the directions multiple times now.
Yeah,
Doesn't look like anyone, Mr. Schulman.
okay. I'm glad because the people got the message that this is not the public hearing on the project itself. I'm sure there'll be plenty of people who want to comment on the project itself. And that's as it should be. Okay, we have a resolution on this. Oh, I'm sorry. Going to close the public portion of the public hearing. Attorney Suchi, are there any final comments before we close the hearing?
No, Mr. Schulman, we rest.
Okay, with that, we will close the public hearing and move to action. Steve, do we have a resolution, or is it the membership?
No, there's a resolution. If I can find it, it's on my screen. I just got to figure out how to get to it.
Okay.
Because there are a couple of conditions that go along related to the landscaping as well. So.
Okay.
Is that big enough, or do you need it?
Can you blow it up just a bit? That's fine.
And I scratched out, you can see deleted here was number 6. That was deleted because we had put in a condition regarding the fire hydrants because the information hadn't been provided, but the applicant did provide updated information showing the locations. So we would take that out as a condition.
Okay. So the numbering will change.
Yes. So that one will come out. And I think that's all of them. And then the last condition that just relevant to what Attorney Suchi had spoke to is condition 8. The subdivision regulations do require flowering street trees every 25 feet. But, discussions with TMP and, considering what's on the site already, it makes sense to consider the subdivided parcels and the other parcels as a whole when looking at the landscaping. So as part of the site plan application, that's will be before you shortly, that we think a consolidated landscape plan for the entire frontage makes more sense than just looking at this small piece.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move.
Okay, Mr. Rowena moves. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second from Mr. Bryce. Questions, comments? Go ahead, Tammy.
Question, please. Thank you. So we're just strictly voting on the subdivision and really has absolutely no bearing on what the applicant might choose to do with the subdivision.
Correct. That anybody could technically carve up their lot into 20 pieces if they wanted to. That's their right to do so. They don't have to necessarily show you that they have anything planned for those particular properties.
Okay, and so once the properties are subdivided, though whatever goes in there may or may not come before us?
No, will come.
It will.
Well,
intended that it will come before us, and although it's only a site plan review, we will hold a public hearing on it.
Just one clarification on that. So the 3-acre parcel, which is basically where Corville Nursery is starting to operate now, that was just a zoning permit. So was an over-the-counter permit as of right use. So that one will occupy the space of the subdivision. The larger 30+ acre remaining piece, which is the subject of the site plan application, that one will come to the commission as a separate item. That's probably going to be what I'll talk about later, but early May.
Yeah.
Which
Thank
I
you.
think you got a preview on that a couple of weeks ago, and you authorized the peer review for that particular project.
Thanks for the clarification, Steve.
Sure.
Yes,
Since we
thank you.
did get the preview and, there are application materials out and there's news articles out, is it the case that if the subdivision wasn't approved, the current planned uses that we previewed and the nursery starting to operate wouldn't be possible? And likewise, I guess, no, not likewise, just that question.
I had a little tough time hearing you, so I think you were asking if you didn't approve the subdivision application, would the uses proposed be still allowed to go forward?
Would it? Yeah, I guess I understand that anybody has the right to subdivide their property if it meets like height and width, basically is what it is, right? Width and square footage. So like that's sort of neither here nor there. But I guess what I'm wondering more of is like why does it need to be subdivided? Like, does the subdivision need to happen for the proposed plans to happen in some way?
So leaving the MTA larger project out of that, because that really has nothing to do with the subdivision. The subdivision, I'm not sure why they carved off the 1-acre piece at the bottom. It might be something to do with Metro North long-term. I don't know. But the 3-acre piece where Corville is operating, technically the property owner can open up their own nursery on 3 acres, or they could lease that land to Corville for 3 acres. But I believe Mr. Corville was looking for ownership of a certain amount of land, and that was the agreement that they came to with the property owner on that configuration.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
Sorry, I have one
Tammy.
more.
Sure.
Does, and maybe this is for Attorney Suchi, is the applicant going to,
We can't ask questions of Attorney Suchi.
oh, sorry.
I'm
Okay,
sorry,
well,
the
maybe I could
public
ask
hearing's been
Steve.
closed.
Oh, okay, Steve. Does the applicant maintain ownership of these subdivided lots? Or is the applicant maintaining ownership?
They could subdivide the lots and maintain ownership, but I think in this instance, at least for the 3 acre piece, that will be Corville owned at some, if it hasn't happened already, I don't know the status of that. But they could choose to subdivide it and maintain ownership, or they could sell them.
They could sell it, and they don't need to have any particular frontage on Norton Place to sell the lot.
No, well, the subdivision does require frontage, so it does comply with the minimum, it exceeds the minimum standard.
Okay, so it's kind of like a flag lot then. It was hard to tell on that map that they provided where exactly it was getting chopped off. Not that
I'm so glad I'm not the only one. I
Yeah,
was
that
like,
map
am
is
I
not
missing a
crystal
map
clear.
here? I'm like searching and searching and searching.
Right.
Can we get just like a Tetris of it? Like just
Yeah, the map is not crystal clear.
No.
Well, can you
But
blow
the-
that area up, Steve?
Yeah, if it lets me.
There you go.
How's that?
That's good.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of lines on here because there's different easements and things that are on here already. So they put everything on this map. They could have, maybe a clean map of just the subdivision piece might have helped, but you have this area through here, which is, so there's the easement that goes through the properties, and that's access to not only the Corville site, but also access down to the lower parcel and to the rear. And then this area through here is one lot, and then the lower lot is down here. So it, like, you probably can't read those numbers unless I really blow it up. It's a little deceiving too, because this is you're talking about a 30+ acre piece of property, so it might seem smaller than it is because the map is the same size as you might see for like a 2 acre lot, but it's a pretty large parcel.
Any other questions? All right, if not, we have a motion to approve. We have a second. Steve, let's do a roll call.
Certainly.
This is to approve the 3-lot subdivision.
Sure. So Mr. Williams,
Yes.
Ms. Jordan Byron,
Yes.
Ms. Topachnik,
yes.
Ms. Wells, Yes.
Galen, you're muted.
Yes.
yes, Ms. Langalis,
Yes.
Mr. Bryce,
Yes.
Mr. Cantor,
Yes.
Mr. Rowena,
Yes.
and Mr. Schulman.
Yes,
Okay, unanimous.
Thank you, everyone.
thank you. Okay, next we have review and action on applications 2024-15 SPR 3-Color LLC 175 West Cedar, District 5, Block 64, lots 15 and 423. Construction of a 12-unit multifamily structure and a 2-unit mixed-use structure for a total of 14 dwelling units. And
Got me again, I'm sorry.
okay. Okay. Go ahead, Attorney Suchi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Liz Suchi of Carmody, Torrance, Sandak, and Hennessy, 1055 Washington Boulevard. I represent the owner of the property, 3-Color LLC. Present for tonight's meeting is Gino Matera. He's the owner of 3-Color LLC and the applicant, Maria Genovese and Bill Andriopoulos. Bill is the principal at Andriopoulos Design Associates, and Ms. Genovese is the project manager on this project. Harry Roachville, civil engineer with McCord Engineering, Matt Pop, landscape architect with Environmental Land Solutions, and last but not least, Neil Linsky, traffic engineer with SLR Consulting. The application for site plan review was filed February 12th under the prior zoning regulations, and this property at that time was designated as business number 2. Neighbors were notified of the submission of the application by certificate of mailing on February 12th, and the certificate was returned to the staff. The property is located at the corner of West Cedar Street and Scribner Avenue, and the properties are identified as 175 West Cedar and 0 or no address Scribner Avenue. Mr. Matera purchased that corner piece from the city of Norwalk, and it does not have a specific street address. Total, the lot size is just over a half acre, 24,297 square feet, or 0.558 acres, and it's generally vacant. It's bordered by West Cedar to the north, Scribner Avenue to the south, and other developed properties to the south and the east. Across the street is the Norwalk Housing Authority property, which is currently under renovation and new construction. And catty corner from the property is the Best Buy TJ Maxx shopping center. The application filed was a site plan review application. It's to develop the site with 2 structures with the associated site improvements, including driveways, parking, landscaping. One structure known as Building A. Maybe take a break at the second. Ms. Genovese, could you screen share? If you wouldn't mind, or Mr. Roach, rather than Ms. Genovese, Mr. Roachfield, could you screen share the site plan? I apologize. Thank you. So as he's doing that, one structure, Building A, which is to the right of your screen, would contain 12 apartments, 10 one-bedroom and 2 two-bedroom units. They would range in size from 614 to 735 square feet for the one-bedroom and approximately 817 for the two-bedroom units. The second building, Building B, which is closer to Scribner Avenue, will contain two apartments of 612 square feet and ground floor commercial space. 2 of the units will be in the Building A will be deed restricted as affordable in accordance with Section 118-1050, the city's workforce housing regulations. 2,100 square feet of recreation area is required, and we're providing 2,800. 22 parking spaces are required. We're providing 25, I think it was the final number. And solar panels are contemplated for the roof of the larger residential building, with electric vehicle charging stations proposed located outdoors between the 2 buildings. To date, fire, South Norwalk Electric and Water, health sign-offs are in. TMP comments were just received last night, but I think we also have received DPW and WPCA comments, which would be incorporated into final documents submitted for the zoning permit. At this point, Mr. Roachfield, would you describe the site plan and your analysis of drainage to the commissioners? Thereafter, Mr. Andriopoulos and Ms. Genovese will describe the architectural design, exterior materials and floor plans. And finally, Neil Alinsky will explain his findings of his traffic analysis. Harry?
Thank you, Liz. For the record, Harry Roachville, professional engineer in the state of Connecticut with McCord Engineering and Associates located in Wilton. I'm just going to switch over to the existing conditions survey so you can get a look at how the property exists today. As Attorney Suchi had mentioned, it is primarily vacant. This whole area over here consisting of lawn with a small gravel laydown yard, I guess you could say, over in this property, in this corner of the property. For the proposed development, we analyzed the property as a whole, the entire about half-acre property. We submitted a drainage analysis for up to a 100-year storm conforming to the City of Norwalk drainage standards. To accomplish that, we're proposing 2 underground detention systems, one located here just north of Building A, one located here just north of Building B under the at-grade parking lot. The first underground detention system will receive roof leaders from Building A, as well as the driveway, which provides access to the first floor parking of Building A, as well as the open air first level parking of Building A. That will all that runoff will be conveyed to this underground detention system here. We did soil testing to confirm there be suitable soil conditions in this area. And this detention system is designed to overflow to a city catch basin right here during extreme storm events. Same rationale was used over here for this detention system. Roof runoff from Building B will be conveyed to this detention system, as well as runoff from the on-grade parking lot will be captured by catch basins and conveyed here. Same thing as the other one. It is designed to overflow during extreme storm events to another city catch basin located here. And again, we did soil testing in this area and confirmed suitable soil conditions. There is a sanitary sewer easement that runs through the property here. This development has been coordinated with WPCA regarding sort of the activity we could do up top that easement, and it is essentially just the on-grade parking lot will be above that easement, and WPCA was okay with that. So that makes it sort of easy to tie in our sanitary laterals that will all be done on site. Lateral for building A, you see here, lateral for building B, you see here. There's also water, gas, and power in both streets. So we will tie in to those utilities for both buildings that will all be coordinated with the local utility companies. There is an existing gas line currently as well that runs through the property. Our client has already been in discussions with the local gas company and they plan on moving that main within the next year into the street. So that will not be impacted by this construction. The detention system, the entire stormwater management system also controls water quality volume and recharges groundwater consistent with the Norwalk drainage standards. We did receive comments from DPW, as Attorney Sushi had mentioned. They're all minor in nature and all comments that we can handle on a next revision of these drawings for zoning permits and building permits. That's a brief summary of the utility plan. I'd be happy to answer any questions that any commissioners have.
Any
And I will stop sharing my screen. Oh, sorry. I'll stop sharing my screen if there are any questions, so Andropoulos can share theirs. Okay.
Anyone have any questions of Mr. Rocheville? Okay, at this point, Mr. Andriopoulos and Ms. Genovese, could you screen share your plans and describe the project to the commission?
Okay, good evening, Mr. Commissioner. For the record, my name is Bill Andriopoulos. I'm the principal architect of Andriopoulos Design Associates, LLC, and we're located at 16 River Street in Norwalk, Connecticut. To give you a closer look at the building, Building A, which is the three-story building facing north on West Cedar Street. This first diagram is of the lower level parking, below grade parking area, which has 4 parking spaces and a stairwell up to the first floor reception lobby. That's accessed via overhead garage door off of the shared driveway off of West Cedar Street. Shared driveway with the Building B and Building A.
And the on-grade parking that's outside.
And the on-grade parking next to Building B. So one level up from that lower level foundation plan and lower level parking is the main level, first floor level parking garage, which has approximately what is it, 13?
13 spaces.
I think it's 13 parking spaces at this level, including the one handicap parking space, which has accessibility, obviously, to the lobby and elevator core and stairwell number 1. There's also a mail room on this level where packages can be received and mail will be kept for each of the 12 units in this building. And then associated storage, a mechanical room, and some other bike storage for bikes is downstairs or outside?
We have 2 bike racks outside, and then we can offer some additional storage in here for bike racks.
I'm sorry, for the record, this is Maria
Sorry.
Genovese.
Yes, sorry.
Senior project manager.
Sure.
Okay, so that's it for this first floor level parking garage, which is open to the air on 3 sides, by the way, to the south, east, and west. It's completely open to the air. And so at the second floor level, proposed floor plan, there are 5 units here, 6 units, 5 of which are 1-bedroom units, and one 2-bedroom unit. Show them the
This
2-bedroom unit
one is the two.
on each floor. So it's in the same location up above. There's your stairwell access, elevator access up to the second floor and to the roof. So if we go up to the second floor, it's a mirror image of the down floor, first floor, second floor level. 2-bedroom unit in the corner and 5 1-bedroom units. There's a 1 workforce housing unit on each level. At level 3 here, it's unit number 5.
12.
Pardon me?
It's unit number 12.
Unit number 12
And on the second floor, it's unit number 4.
and unit number 4. So those are the 2 workforce housing units, both are 1-bedroom. And then you take the elevator or stairwell up to the roof. We have 2 means of egress off of this rooftop platform. And our recreation and eating area. We have a picnic area, a game area, and what we call a lounge area for recreation space. TV and such, outdoor TV. Mechanical room, mechanical area is open to the air, fenced in, and completely separated, with minimum of more than 10 feet on all 4 sides to the edge of the building. And we've also allocated an amount of space for an array of solar panels, which could even wrap around the backside of that utility area. The entire rooftop platform is screened with a 6-foot fence, which starts at the floor level and extends 4 feet above the parapet. So to screen, entirely the activity on the rooftop level. And for security and safety, of course. The exterior of the building is an EIFS material. We've implied, 2 different, 3 different types of finishes with the EIFS material. One's a simulated vertical wood panel. The other is a plain stucco finish for an even, smooth surface, and then a classical, it's a contemporary panel design, which if we could zoom in on this a little bit.
I'm going to zoom in.
If we zoom in on this a little bit, you'll be able to see that texture and panels design on this end of the building and the vertical joint of the simulated wood. Simulated wood will be a darker color. The plain stucco is a lighter color for contrast. And then the panel is a combination of 2 lighter colors to give contrast and provide interest and texture to the facade. Now that facade, this is our north elevation, which is the main entrance, and the driveway access to the first floor parking garage is on the left. That's off of West Cedar. And you can see there's a retaining wall up the side, and some planting and landscaping all across the front on the West Cedar Street elevation. This is our west side elevation, right side from the front. There's the overhead door access to the foundation, the lower below subgrade parking area and stair access. The screened in on this facade, because it faces the street, we've kind of showed maybe a fencing or an open grill type work for those openings there. They may even get, so right now they kind of line up with the windows, and we think that symmetry is good. So, but that's also open for the element.
For the upper level garage.
Yeah.
And then there's some retaining walls on the side here that step up, and there's landscaping in between that. And then the railings are here for safety purposes, so no one falls or tries to come in.
Yeah.
And then these are the windows for the residential units above here. And then this is the windows for the stair tower here.
Yeah, the reason for all the fencing is primarily the building is built into the, the southern property line, and the eastern side of the building is a much higher elevation from West Cedar Street. So the building is built into the side. So this here is the rear elevation. So from the south side, this view faces south. And
neighbors.
And it's, it's essentially 2 stories from this elevation, which is to our adjacent neighbor to the south and east. And then there's one more side.
Yep.
And this is a reverse of that view, which is showing a slope going down the other way. So this is our left side elevation facing east.
And it shows the sloped driveway.
And
going up.
those 6 windows there are are inside probably the living rooms of those 3 units on that side.
So now we're gonna-
Okay, so that's the end of building A. Building B quickly is another 3-story building. This has our commercial level on grade with doors, access, and windows to the parking lot. And faces basically
This faces West Cedar Street all.
West Cedar on that side. There's a door on each side of that first floor level that brings separate tenants on either side up to a 2-bedroom townhouse on each side. So there are 2 2-bedroom townhouses in this building. And first floor kitchen, living room, and in a half bath. And then upstairs, 2 bedrooms and a full bath
No,
in each of the each of the townhouses with their own laundry closet and walk-in closets and that sort of thing. No access to the roof in this building. They share the recreational area with the building A. It's all common.
They'll have a key card that gives them access from the elevator to go all the way up. And this is the view from West Cedar Street. We've applied the same type of panelized and vertical system here to mimic what we've done on the larger building. And there's a lot more glass here for the retail or business tenant that will be on the first floor.
Yeah.
This is the, you have any questions?
Yeah, real quick on that first floor, is the intent there for it to be 1 tenant or 2 for that commercial space on the first floor?
It could be 1 whole tenant, it could be 2. We were just showing the abilities to divide it.
We have it set up with 2 double doors to each side, but it'll be wide open if someone wants to take the whole thing.
And this is the right side, which faces the corner of West Cedar Street and Scribner. So this is the view you will see coming up Scribner Avenue on the right-hand side as you approach the stop sign. And again, we applied the same panelized system here and vertical so that it mimics the other building on the lot. And this view is from Scribner as well, but the landscaping slope, even though we have the retaining wall here, in reality, it comes down around in slopes. So you don't really see all of this at the bottom because of the hill. From Scribner, it's up from on the site plan, there was, the other road was Fairview, which is up much higher from us. It's up about 30 feet in the air. It's where the contractor's yard is directly to our south. So the grade continues to come down naturally that way. And then this is the view actually from the Fairview side.
Yeah, up in the back.
It cuts it off, as you can see the retaining walls here. So you only see 2 stories of the building, which is the residential. These windows are in the landing at the stairwell so that you get some
And
light.
that's a contractor's yard back there.
Yes, and the parcel we directly abut where these areas are with the retaining walls is a contractor's yard. So, and then we have a roof plan here. It is a flat roof. We have the required screening back 10 feet, and there's a section for mechanical, and then there's a section for some future solar arrays. And that's what we have for.
That's the end of that.
That's the end of that. So if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
I may have missed it. Do you have any EV charging stations in the parking area?
Yes, sir. I think Harry Harry, you want to, I'm going to stop sharing so Harry can
Charging.
share his screen again. Yes, I believe is there one or two, Harry?
We have one at the on-grade parking. I'll
I think
highlight.
one at the end. You could show them where they are.
Yeah, right here,
Right now,
And then
right in the island here.
that's right now.
And that meets the state requirement?
I
Yep,
believe so.
I believe so. And then there's bike racks shown over here as well, which were mentioned in their presentation.
Yeah, I don't think the state requirement kicks in for this, Lewis, based on number of units.
Oh, too few units.
Yeah, but we can address that to come zoning permit or building permit time.
If you don't have any other questions of Mr. Andriopoulos, Ms. Genovese, or Mr. Rochefield, perhaps we could have Matt Pop, do you explain the landscape plan briefly? Then we'll have Neil come on.
Okay.
Good evening, Matthew Pop, landscape architect. For some reason, my video is not connecting. I think it's got the host has to start it. Okay, Matt Pop, landscape architect, environmental land solutions from Norwalk. Here we go. Hang on a second.
We can see you, Matt.
There we go. There we go. So along the streets, we have 10 shade trees. Those are 10 oaks of 10 different types. There's what I like about the project is there's sidewalks. The trees are adjacent to the sidewalks. So there's 10 street trees. Again, the shade trees, the large growing ones. The site also includes, I would say, called one medium-sized tree, a yellow wood, and 7 understory trees, and a number of evergreens for screening, mainly along the northern or eastern property line. I don't know if I could share my screen. Let's just see. There we go. There's the 10 street trees along through here, along West Cedar. We have smaller understory trees or smaller trees here. Those are mainly all native species along kind of the northeastern section of the property here. We have evergreen screening. We do have 3 light poles in the fixture right here. It's a small 12-foot high LED fixture. It's downward pointing, so it's dark sky compliant. It's 3000 K, which is a warm light fixture, so there won't be any harsh lighting. The fixtures are located, one along the driveway here, so this area will be lit. 2 in this island here, so this area gets lit, and then the third one is right here, so this area is lit. And then again, in addition to the trees, we have foundation plantings along the kind of the front and the sides here, and then over here and in the back here. The sidewalk is right through here. So the trees are kind of located on the back side of the sidewalk. Again, the sidewalk's kind of right up along the street. That's it quickly. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Let me see.
Anyone have any questions of Mr. Pop?
Yes, please, Ms. Suchi. If I may.
Go ahead. Sure.
Thank you. So forgive me for not being aware of the fact that the applicant bought the parcel from the city on the corner of Scrivener and West Cedar. I remember in our planning commission, we talked about. Sorry?
Can hear you.
Oh, you can or you can't?
You can.
Okay, so when we talked about that parcel in the planning commission a couple years back, and one of the things that we really liked and wanted the city to preserve about it was it's a highly congested area. And there's so little open space in the area. And my question, I guess, is all of your quote sort of amenity space is on the roof, and I don't expect you to share your private property with the public. I'm really glad that you're planting as many trees as possible. It's a very busy corner. And is the asphalt area, if I'm reading your diagram correctly, it's sort of, I see the driveway and it goes down and it's sort of that void in between the two buildings. That's it for your parking lot, and then the rest would be landscaped?
That's correct. As part of the purchase as well of the property, the city property on Scribner, there was some as part of that transfer. There was a requirement that certain plantings be installed in that area, and that was part of the conveyance to Mr. Matera.
I see. And so all of the existing greenery there will have to be taken down in order to put up the structures and then replant?
A good portion of it, yes.
Okay. And did I just understand correctly, the parking garage is 2 stories on the larger building?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for those who've presented so far? So we have just Neil Alinsky, and then before we conclude, Mr. Matera would like to address you briefly, but Neil, would you mind sharing with the commission the results of your traffic study?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Liz. Attorney Suchi. For the record, Neil Olinsky with SLR Consulting, and we have offices in New Haven and Cheshire. And we did the traffic study for the development. It's not a very large development, and as you can imagine, the amount of new traffic that could be that corresponds with the development is also not a whole heck of a lot. We estimated the amount of new traffic that will be generated by this development based on, like we do in many traffic studies, based on statistics published in the Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Manual. And for a development of this type and size, estimating that during a typical weekday morning peak hour, it might generate around 5 entering trips and 5 exiting trips for 10 total trips during the entire single morning peak hour. During a typical afternoon peak hour, the stats would estimate around 10 entering trips and 10 exiting trips during the hour. So not a whole heck of a lot of traffic. We then went through the steps of a typical traffic impact study. We took counts of nearby intersections. We counted Scribner and West Cedar, as well as I think it's Suncrest right there at the site driveway. We counted those, and we analyzed the traffic flow with and without the new development's traffic on top or in the mix. What we found is that regardless of this development and this new traffic, the study intersections are expected to continue to operate the same. So during the morning peak hour, for example, the all-way stop operates at overall level service B. During the afternoon peak hour, it operates with level service C's and better. So on a scale of A to F, with A being the very low end of the range, or the good end of the range, I guess you could say, with very little traffic delay, and F being congestion, level C is sort of your status quo. The important point is traffic operations at these study intersections are going to stay the same regardless of this development. Thus, this development is not expected to have a traffic impact. So that is the bulk of our traffic study. We got TMP comments late yesterday. Skimming and reading through those, they did not have any comments on our traffic analysis findings or results. So presumably they agree with our report. They did have some fine-tuning comments to the site plan having to do with the sidewalks, I think the dumpster location, some fine-tuning of tree placement to maximize sight lines from the driveways. We looked at the driveway sight lines, and they are expected to meet minimum state criteria, subject, of course, to proper placement of trees. and clearing of vegetation and things like that over the course of the project. Proper maintenance and cutting of grass and trimming of low-hanging branches and things like that. So that is pretty much it for traffic, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Neil, this is probably more of a question for Liz and Mr. Matera, but TMP had the one comment about setting the sidewalk back from the road and then using that amenity space that would be created to put the street trees there. Is that something that you'd be amenable to addressing or looking into or implementing as a condition of approval?
Well, we haven't really talked it over internally, but I think we'd be amenable to looking into it. You know, a lot of it comes down to, will the trees survive, I think, in that strip, and that's probably a better, something that Matt Pott might be better to speak to. But other than that, I don't have a problem with it personally.
Since we just got the comment yesterday, really haven't had the time to evaluate and have everyone take a look and weigh in. We'll take a look.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Anyone have any questions for Mr. Olinsky? Okay, well, finally, Mr. Matera, now is your time. You can address the commission since this is one of the first projects that you have before them. Gino?
Thank you, Liz. My name is Gino Matera. I want to take the time to thank the Planning and Zoning Commission for reviewing my application. I was born and raised in Norwalk. I've worked and owned Ole Matera Contracting Company for 41 years. My business is based out of Norwalk. When I was a kid, my father built the adjacent property on West Cedar Street, number 167, and he built that in 1978. My family also purchased 175 West Cedar Street, where I am proposing to build this mixed-use building. I own 4 other properties in Norwalk, 2 on Winfield Street, 1 on Matthias Court, and 1 on Newtown Avenue. I've been managing these properties since 2006. I remember as a kid, there was a road that went through the corner of this property at the intersection of West Cedar Street and Scribner Avenue. I've noticed the potential in this area for a while, which is why I'm excited to have the opportunity to build this mixed-use building, because I can bring together families and businesses through the 14 dwelling units and 2 retail spaces. I hope that you view this project as something that would help revitalize the area, and I ask you to approve this application. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We have nothing else, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we will close this and move on to action. Steve, can you put up the resolution, please? Or Brian?
So the only thing I'd add, Mr. Schulman, that's not in here is just that they take a look at those TMP conditions and just implement as part of the as they go through the approval process.
All right, so why don't we make that a condition? It looks good. Can I have a motion to approve the resolution?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, Galen has made the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And Richard has seconded.
And Anne had her hand up, but I guess you didn't see it.
I couldn't see.
Yeah.
Thank you, JJ. Comments about the project or the resolution? All
I'm
right.
very glad to see new development in this area. I think it'll be nice.
All right. Are we ready then to go to a vote?
Yep.
Okay, then this is a vote in favor of approving the site plan for the project. We should do a roll call.
Sure. Mr. Williams,
Yes.
Miss Jordan Byron,
My ocean.
Yes.
Miss Tabashnik,
Yes.
Mr. Cantor,
Yes.
Miss Wells,
Yes.
Miss Langalis,
Yes.
Mr. Bryce,
Yes.
Mr. Rowena,
Yes.
and Mr. Schulman.
Yes.
It is unanimous.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone, for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of our March 6th meeting. Can I have a motion to approve, please? Galen has moved and Chapin has seconded. All those in favor, just show of hands. And any abstentions?
I abstain. I had to leave the meeting early.
Okay. And JJ, you were abstaining?
Yes. I didn't get a chance to read it. Sorry, I'm really behind.
Oh, that's okay. Appreciate your honesty.
Okay.
Okay. Comments of the director, Steve?
No, it's like any, if you want to chat about anything, it's late, so I'll refrain from anything else.
Okay. Anything anybody want to chat about?
All of the good restaurants are closed at this point.
Steve, certainly the action taken by BLT is unfortunate. If at some point they want to move forward, what happens? How is that done?
Well, I'm, I think they've made a very considerable investment in this area. I don't think we've heard the last of them. I'm sure there'll be conversations between city staff and them going forward, but they have to submit a new application. So probably be the same.
Does that mean then that they would have to come back under the new regulations?
No, that since the master plan was approved under the old regulations, they still fall under that. So basically, they would probably incorporate the record from the hearings into that I'm assuming they'll come forward with pretty much the same project and then with a very similar request, and hopefully we have some of these outstanding issues cleaned up before they get in front of you guys.
Okay.
I did send out with the packet just one thing. If anybody has any comments or edits for that memo to TMP about coming in and talking about the residential parking permit program, just shoot me an email with any thoughts or anything. Otherwise, I'll send it out to them and we'll figure out a date and time to have them come talk to you guys.
Okay. Yeah, a meeting where we actually have the bandwidth to have a conversation with them so that there's enough opportunity for conversation.
I'd be willing to motion to adjourn.
Pardon me, Galen, I'm sorry.
I'd be willing to make a motion to adjourn.
You would? Is there anyone willing to second that
I'm
motion?
willing to second.
With
Okay. All in favor?
I,
All right, thank you all for your patience.
Oh, do you have 30? I'm sorry, I apologize.
Go ahead.
I'll send an email out as a follow-up, but we had looked, your first May meeting is scheduled for May 1st. We had two larger public hearings tentatively scheduled on that as the only two items on the agenda. But it turns out all the traffic consultants that we would need at that meeting are all going to be at a conference. So I said I would ask about pushing that meeting off till May 8th, a week later, which is also a Wednesday. So if you could think about that, and I'll send you an email reminder about that.
Okay.
are they all May Day celebrations?
They may be, who knows? I don't know what you do with a bunch of traffic engineers in one room, but
Right.
I'll pass.
Also, just a reminder, our next
Yeah,
meeting, our
avoid.
next meeting is April 3rd. See you all then.
Okay, goodbye.
Good night.